Yo,
How's it going?
Hey, Russ.
Yeah,
can you guys hear?
yeah. Mark is telling me about Chivalry 2.
Oh yeah, when's the beta come out for that, Mark?
Yesterday.
Oh, damn. All right. How long is it going on for?
I'm not sure. I know it's going through the weekend. I don't know when they're gonna take it down, but yeah,
Did you
Enrico
try
and I
it?
were playing last night.
How is it? Did you say you're
Yeah,
playing it tonight?
last night I said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's chaotic.
Oh, all right then.
Yeah, because there are a lot of situations where it's like a 4-on-1. Either you're the
Oh,
1 or you're in the 4, and just like both sides clashing and lots of chaos. And a lot of the time I accidentally hit my own teammates with my attacks, and they take damage for that instead of hitting
oh,
my.
there's friendly fire.
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, they don't take as much damage as the enemy would take if they got hit. But yeah, it's just kind of chaotic, and it's tough to land blows sometimes. It's I don't know. I had a mixed first impression, so I'd like to try it some more.
Okay. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'd definitely be interested in trying it. I'll have to download it. I've got
Yeah,
time
definitely
tomorrow
a really
before.
cool idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 7 gigs, so just download it tonight.
Oh, that's nothing. Okay.
Yeah, this kind of sounds like Mordhau.
Yeah, except you don't have like the meme with like a medieval knight with a gun.
Hmm.
I'm guessing.
I've heard of Mordhau, and I've heard that it got some things that were kind of out of place in it.
Yeah.
Why would they give knights a crossbow?
Well, you can get a crossbow in Chivalry or a regular bow.
Well, that's true.
Oh, and gentlemen, by the way, we're live.
All right.
Oh, oh. Something tells me you're fond of waiting to tell us that.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
So how are we doing tonight, gentlemen?
Doing pretty well.
Awesome.
Ready to get talking about some microtransactions in games. Hot
Mhm.
topic.
Yeah.
Nice. That'll be
Alright.
fun.
All right.
There's gonna be a big can of worms to open on that one. Oh, sorry, bag of fish.
Yeah, there's your bag of fish. He's trying to
There we go.
memify that.
I'll get there.
Yeah.
One day when we make it big, we're gonna have T-shirts with Russ's face on it, and it's gonna say "bag of fish" or
Mhm.
something like that. Something goofy.
Yeah.
Fillet of fish. There we go.
No one's gonna understand, and they're just gonna think it's a outdated fish reference.
It is. Actually, I think it's kettle of fish, but that's a different story. It's all good.
I don't like kettlefish.
Anyway.
All right then.
All right, welcome everybody to Dialogue Options Episode 2. As you can tell by the title and the description, we are going to be talking about monetization in video games. Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? Yeah, so let's give everybody a few minutes to hop in on the stream. I'm sure all 2 of my subscribers have gotten their push notifications saying, hey, we live. I also put it out on, my Facebook for whoever wants to watch. And boys, I will send you the stream link in Discord if you so care to watch. Oops, wrong link. Don't click that.
Oh, that's yeah. That is definitely not us. That is totally Jim Sterling.
Yep, so that's one of our videos for tonight that we're going to be reacting to.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking a look at a few videos to kind of help us, chew through the topic at hand and give us some talking points. All right, boys, that should be the correct link.
Well, let's take a look here, shall we?
That is certainly the correct link. All right, so, and I'm working on getting us the watch together
All right.
going.
There's one watching right now, and I know exactly who it is. I
Oh,
know who he is because he's me.
of course
Hey, I'm
I
watching
know.
too.
He's
We
me.
just won.
All right, and boys, there is the link to the Watch Together. So people who don't know of Watch Together is this cool little streaming platform that you can go ahead and watch YouTube videos together with your friends. So you don't need to set up an account, but You can if you'd like, and you can just set up temporary viewing rooms to watch videos together from the comfort of your own home and the safety of your bedroom with your friends.
All right, so I guess we go click on that right now, huh?
Yes, please go ahead and click that watch together link, gentlemen.
Yes, I'm sure I want to go there. Pick a nickname. All right, fine.
Yeah, you don't
If
need
I
a
must.
nickname.
Well, I'm gonna pick one
I'm
anyway.
user dash AceXWing.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
auto-generated
William
names.
Russell Downey the third.
Oh, don't be that person.
Looks like we're just waiting on Russell again. Third time this evening.
Oh, shut it.
The Archive. Okay. That's a bit of an odd name. Also, ladies and gentlemen, please.
What, the archive?
Check out this sick...
Ask one of our other members about that.
Ah, yes, the good old archive. Established whenever I met Ross and Dan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, check out this sick ass fade. Ooh, we are on the watch together on the stream, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get started. Absolutely, feel free to pause and comment as you feel is necessary.
Can we
So
actually pause it as well?
Yes, you can. You have full control over the pause, the fast forward buttons, and it will affect me and Mark. Russell.
I feel like there's some Twitch plays Pokemon shenanigans about to happen, but we'll see.
Oh, please, for the love of God.
Are we starting out with the video?
Do you wanna, or do you wanna chat about like other things? I'm kind of going loosey goosey with this.
We could, just open up. If anybody has some general ideas, I was thinking that they want to throw around, kind of get the ball rolling, and then maybe jump to the video. Then, what do you think about that?
Yeah, let's go for that. That sounds more organized.
Sure. Is anybody like raring to go right now? Do you have anything like cocked and ready to launch?
I have several kind of key subject areas I want to hit, but maybe we should let the video at least be an introduction for us, and then we can kind of hit those topics in kind.
All right, 34-minute introduction video. Are you sure, Russ?
Oh, all right. Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
Fine.
let's kind of establish what game monetization is. What are some of its, what exactly would you consider game monetization, and how would you categorize it?
I would say game monetization is anything outside of the initial purchase that costs money for the game, with a few exceptions. But in general, we're talking about things like downloadable content, DLC, if you will, any kind of cosmetic items, skins, loot boxes, especially, which we're getting a chance to talk about that one. That'll be fun. Anything basically that you wind up paying for extra outside of the original game that you bought when it was first released, or whenever you bought the game, as it were. That's my definition of it. The only thing I exclude from that are old school expansion packs for PC games, but that's kind of another category in and of itself that we'll talk about later, or at least that I'll plan to talk about later. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, true. I mean, my definition kind of falls in line with yours, Russ. Really, pretty much anything extra, after that initial game purchase that you need to spend real currency on is would be microtransactions, monetization, and I would say for me, like I wouldn't really be focusing too much on the more substantial DLC contents that are released, here and there for certain games, because to me, I kind of liken them to the PC expansion packs that you referenced, because it's like this whole new add-on for your game. But first thing that pops into my mind is like Witcher 3, for example, had those two main expansion
Oh,
DLCs.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't feel like that's sort of a microtransaction. It's definitely monetization. There's tons of monetization going on, but
that's true. There are some examples though of like DLC for games where it was like on disc DLC that was monetized. I was talking with Joe earlier, and one of the examples that I kind of remembered was Mass Effect 3.
Hmm.
Had some stuff that was basically like on disc DLC. The only thing paying for it did was unlock it on the disc. And that kind of stuff to me was fairly egregious because if it's on the disc, you should get it when you purchase the entire game. The other
Yeah,
example I wanted to.
that's definitely problematic when publishers do that. I hear you there. It's you know, if they're gonna make you pay extra to access that, I would rest easier if they just didn't include it on the disc. You know, it would make me feel better if I knew that they needed more time to like work on something before they
Mhm.
finally pushed it to market. But knowing that it's right there on the disc, ready to go, you just need to pay more to access it. Yeah, that's kind of shady.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess the other side of that coin, along with that, on disc DLC, is cases where developers pushed a game to market too early, and then essentially fleshed out the rest of the game, but still made it a paid DLC, a la Pokemon Sword and Shield, of which that's a big can of worms I can't wait to open. But
You
that's just
mean
me.
bag of fish?
Yes, that's right,
Come on, Russ,
kettlefish.
you're ruining your own catchphrase.
Don't worry, I've got several, and I'll make them all muddy so you can't figure out which one is which.
All right, as per usual. Do you have anything to add to this, Joe?
No, I mean, both of you kind of fully explained everything that I kind of wanted to say, and probably better than I could articulate. I mean, monetization and, microtransactions, I have a tad bit of a history with, and we'll get more into that later. Um, Especially after we watch the first video, the Jim Sterling video. Um, and the reason why I picked that one is because that one kind of hit close to home as far as microtransactions and the whole predatory nature that it seems to have permeated the the gaming sphere, so to speak. So yeah,
Now, are there particular points of this video we're hitting, or are we actually watching the entire thing?
we are gonna watch it in its entirety, Russell. You, like I said, you can feel free to pause at any time to comment, or if there's a point that you hear or that you'd like to highlight, or if there's something that's you think is out of line that you'd like to address, absolutely feel free to pause the video at any time, just speak your mind. We're gonna go.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go wedding rules, speak now or forever hold your peace on this one.
All right.
All right.
Let's dive in.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. The first video by Jim Sterling, The Addictive Cost of Predatory Video Game Monetization. And that's a face. Check that face. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Ooh, hang on. I forgot to unmute this site. There we go. Let's get started.
We do think the way that we have implemented these
Still
kind of
got
mechanics
nothing,
and
Joe.
FIFA, of course, is our big one.
You got nothing?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Check your personal volume on your end.
Yeah, that was
'Cause
good.
Joe was saying that the volume is going to be individual for each of us, so you can adjust it however you want.
Mhm.
Gotcha. I'm
Yep.
sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, so let's scrub it back to 0. That's the face.
That's the face I made when I first saw horse armor in the Xbox 360 store playing Oblivion.
Oh, yeah, that's another example of egregious monetization that was totally unnecessary.
Mhm.
All right, here we go.
We do think the way that we have implemented these kind of mechanics, and FIFA, of course, is our big one, our FIFA Ultimate Team and our packs, is actually quite ethical and quite fun.
Unethical.
Today's Gymquisition, both personally and professionally, is an important one. You could almost say this one is the biggie. This is the result of me having spent a lot of time talking to Gymquisition viewers who have been kind enough to share their own stories. This is the result of me watching on in utter disbelief as the game industry proudly boasts and gloats about the ways in which it psychologically hooks people into unethical, unnecessary, aggressive video game monetization. This episode, more than any other, should indicate to you, should portray to you, should explain to you exactly why I am so committed to expressing my disgust towards the so-called AAA industry. This is a video on the internet. Please enjoy. Addiction is a disease defined by compulsive use of a substance or pattern of behavior.
Just so we're all clear, that was a Fox Mulder doll he had on his podium there.
Oh, nice.
Okay. I just wanted to get that cleared up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to believe.
And Joe, this is playing in the
Hold up. What?
This is playing in the live stream too, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I've worked hard getting this stream ready for this very thing, Russ.
Okie dokie.
All right, let's.
He's on top of it.
Yep. Know me. Organized to a point. All right, let's bring it back a few seconds.
Video on the internet. Please enjoy. Addiction is a disease defined by compulsive use of a substance or pattern of behavior that one cannot stop, even as it has a severe negative consequence on a person's quality of life. The most famous form of addiction is, of course, uncontrollable drug use, as people all too easily can find themselves dependent on any number of chemical substances. Non-chemical addiction can be just as harmful, and because there is no exterior chemical component to point at as the villain, it's often misunderstood in a way that directly harms the addict. Sex addiction, for example, is often portrayed as people just being horny miscreants hiding behind an excuse for infidelity and similar indiscretions. Those with eating disorders are dismissed as greedy, while on the opposite end of the spectrum, compulsive exercising is often overlooked because, hey, exercise is good for you, right? Not if you're doing it so much that you're actually tearing your body apart. Meanwhile, those with gambling problems or shopping addictions are all too easily written off as idiots who can't handle their money correctly. Non-chemical addiction is no less destructive than drug addiction, and I can speak from experience with both. I was in constant chronic pain for over 2 years with a spinal hernia, for which the only genuine treatment I got for the most part was armfuls of painkillers, which after 2 years became a severe dependence. At the same time, I've had friends cope with chemical addiction and sex addiction, and among my many non-chemical vices is a workaholism issue that sees me pour a dangerous, unhealthy amount of my self-esteem and sense of identity to the quality and success of the work I put out there. And in many cases, such as mine, there are deeper psychological issues which addictive behavior is used to cope with. My doctor, for example, cited hypomanic depression as a root cause for my abuse of drugs, a story all too common for too many people. Societal misunderstanding regarding addiction can compound the problem, but there are hundreds of thousands of businesses out there that do understand the power of addictive behavior all too well, and use that understanding to make money. One such industry is the video game industry, which has seen revenue skyrocket by billions since the widespread use of gambling mechanics, raking in cash off the back of those who need help, not animated treasure chests, help, to get themselves to a better place.
So, question, how do you feel about Jim Sterling likening the inclusion of video game monetization into the conversation of addiction?
I don't think it's a thing where the entirety of the practice is necessarily warranting a direct comparison to an addiction, but it certainly can be an extremely addicting behavior, just like anything else.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, it's tough to say because I don't struggle with that addiction, so it's tough to put myself in those kind of shoes for someone who may be struggling with something like that, because I can't speak from that perspective on behalf of those folks.
I think the big thing really comes down to, like, it's essentially, at least in the case of loot boxes, it's essentially the same principle as having a gambling addiction. And most of the time, I speak with absolutely no psychological authority whatsoever, but the impression I get is that it's essentially an inability to be able to stop, paying for it, or essentially gambling. Always kind of thinking, either being addicted to the actual act of opening something that you have a chance to get something that's rare, or having the thought in mind that even if your luck is down, that it's going to turn around, which is I think it's called the gambler's fallacy.
Yes, it is. The next
Yep.
pull will be the one that I get that 5-star recruit.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where he takes the conversation. It seems like he's speaking from a position of experience, so
Mhm.
it's definitely a avenue of thought that I haven't really gone down. We can talk more about the gambling topic later. I'll have more to say on that.
Yeah, and I think that's why this video kind of hits close to home with me, because I do have that personal experience with the the in-game purchases and whatnot. But yeah, like I said, we can get more into that later after the video. All right, so just wanted to check on time. We are all at 3 minutes 51 seconds.
Yep.
All right, cool. Sometimes watch together gets desynchronized, so wanted to check.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
Seems pretty good.
But it isn't just loot boxes, they're an offshoot of microtransactions, and they themselves can be part of the problem. They themselves use psychological tricks, manipulation, to encourage compulsive spending, to appeal to compulsive shoppers. A huge amount of mobile games and microtransaction-led AAA games make the majority of their money from whales. The tiny percent of players who spend thousands of dollars on a single game. Who are these whales? Are they just rich kids with more money than sense? Sure, some of them will be, but not all of them. Maybe not even most of them. Just look up the stories of the people who get themselves into debt over FIFA games, or the children who get their parents into debt over such titles. And some of these spenders, some of these whales, may indeed be addicts. They may be depressed people looking for a temporary high. Some of them may have had their addictions actively egged on by complete fucking scumbags like Tribe Flame CEO Tora Fjernstrom, whose gleefully malevolent lecture, Let's Go Whaling, is a proudly offered confession of exactly how low the game industry will sink to prey on both gambling and shopping addicts.
Some of you will probably be slightly shocked by all the tricks I have listed here, but I'll leave the morality of it out of the talk. We can discuss it if we have time later.
Oh yeah, shocked is the word. And when I watched this 19-minute celebration of exploitation, I understood exactly why morality was left out of it, because there is no fucking morality here. Janstrom lays out exactly how addiction plays a role in so-called whale hunting, describing how the upsale of player convenience gets people forming habits around a video game. This technique is known as hook, habit, hobby, and I'll let Torolf explain it.
Hook, habit, hobby. This is a model from Dmitry Dravanov of Flare Games. It's a model for how people progress in a game. The hook is what gets you into the game to try out a free-to-play game. Then you build it into a habit that you play multiple sessions every day. And then at the end, it's the hobby phase where people see it as one of their main hobbies, and they put lots of time and resources into it.
With the hook, habit, hobby scheme, we see an insidious method of monetizing compulsion. Like a cartoonish drug dealer from an 80s PSA video, the game introduces a good deal first with the aim of getting the customer habitually desirous of more. The concept of the icebreaker deal is downright sinister, and you'd think a casually dressed game dev explaining the concept like it's no big deal would lessen how ghoulish it sounds. But nope, oh my, nope.
The hook is where you put up an icebreaker. You want to give a really, really good deal, something that's a no-brainer. You would be crazy to turn it down as a player. The reason to give a really good deal up front is by making people spend up front, they are also emotionally committing to your game, their retention will go up. And the first spend is, it breaks the ice, then they think of themselves as spenders in the game. It's okay for me to spend in the game. Lots of people are otherwise have this wall up, I will never pay for a mobile game. So you need to break the wall first.
We'll get back to more from this person later on. Right now, let's...
Yeah, I just wanted to stop it there.
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely see what he's saying there. I don't play a whole lot of games on my phone these days, but I know I used to play, I think, Clash of Clans.
I
Did you
still
ever
play it.
that?
I still play it to this day. Yes.
You still play it?
I still play it. Yep.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I remember I used to play that on my phone, and in the beginning it was so easy for me to like build my base and structures and your
Mhm.
defenses and all that stuff. But then after maybe
After
a
a
few
while, it
months,
takes several days or weeks to get one
right?
upgrade. Yeah. And
Yeah, just
so,
yeah.
yeah.
So exactly what he's saying right there with the hook. Within a few months, I was playing. I was in the habit of playing it every day, and I
Mhm.
was getting to the point where it would take an entire day for me to just make one single wall
Yeah.
of my fortress.
Mhm.
And I chose to put it aside at that point.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there are definitely some things in that game that would keep you going if you spent money.
Oh yeah, for
Well,
sure. And I mean, I've been playing that since 2013, and I consistently play it every single day just because I'm stuck playing that game. I haven't, thank God, I haven't spent any money on that game, but there's always that temptation there to go ahead and go,
Oh, I'm
oh
sure. Yeah.
yeah, I'll drop $5 for some more gems to get just enough resources to make that next upgrade. So
well, see, here's the funny part. Like, there's a great video that Game Theory did on this years ago, talking about how it takes advantage of certain kind of, I won't call them loopholes, but certain, kind of aspects of the human psychology. And one of the big ones is that, they'll either allow you to play for a certain amount of time per day, basically meaning that you can't necessarily get your entire fill of the game that you want to, or you'll wind up having like your progress slowed, which makes it easier to think like, all right, this is taking forever. If I just buy a few gems or if I just, put some money into it, it'll get done quicker so I can get that satisfaction.
mhm.
These are basically games that are at least built to satisfy to start, but then take that sense of satisfaction away from you unless you pay into it. It's that very much corresponds to the addiction side of it.
Mhm.
No two ways about it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so I guess now more than ever, I guess now is a good time to kind of like talk about it. So, because I don't want to let it slip from my mind, the part where he talks about getting the player to think, oh, yeah, I think of myself as a spender. So when I first started, I started playing this game a few years back, and Russ, you'll probably remember because I was playing
I
it
do remember it. Yep.
when we were working together. It was a
Mhm.
game called The Walking Dead: Road to Survival. Again,
Yep.
another game that I still play to this day. But there was a while after, um, like what happened. Okay, so it's clearly no secret with the way that I'm kind of like leaning into this. I had a problem with spending money on this game. Um, it started off with me going, "Oh yeah, I'll just drop $20 to get myself a nice pull." I was watching YouTubers go and do $100 pulls, and they'd get exactly the character that they wanted, and it was just like it was that influence that made me go, "Okay, yeah, this dude's doing it. He got lucky. Let me give it a shot." So like my first $20 pull, I got the character that I wanted. And I was just like, all right, so it does work. It's proven it works, you know. So then that $20 turned into $50, turned into $100, turned into one day. I'll never forget it. I was sitting at the dinner table with my family. I dropped $500 in one sitting, and the way I kind of justified it to myself was, I made this money this week. I can afford to spend it. I got all my ducks in a row. I've paid all of my bills. I can do this. And then it got to the point where I went and tried to do it again, and my card company thought it was fraudulent spending. That's how much I had spent in one day, and I had to hide it from my parents. I went outside and said, "Oh yeah, Mom, I'm just gonna go for a walk," and that walk was to go outside so I could call my credit card company and go, "Oh no, that was me," and unfreeze my card. So that was kind of like the wake up call that I needed, and I was just like, okay, I have a problem. I'm really tempted to do it again, even though I know I shouldn't be. And that's when I kind of like just went to my mom and I was like, "Look, Mom, I'm having this problem. I need help." And she was, first of all, she was shocked at the amount of money that I had spent over the course of, I want to say, like 6 months. And she was just like, "All right, well, no, let's not tell your father. Don't tell dad because he's gonna be pissed. And then she had me delete the game, you know. And for a couple years, I didn't play the game because I knew that temptation was gonna be too strong. And then about, I want to say like 3 or 4 months ago, I was like, you know what? I've been good with Clash of Clans. I haven't spent any money on Clash of Clans. I don't see myself as a spender anymore. I'm not going to spend money. So I'll give it another shot. Re-downloaded the game, picked up right where I left off, and then just playing free to play. And to this day, I'm still a little bit tempted, but I've like he described in the video, I've got that wall built up again to say I'm not spending any more money on this game. So
Yeah.
That's good. Well, yeah, I didn't know about that. That's definitely it's tough to bear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad things are looking up now. It's definitely it's pretty devious, the kinds of strategies that they use to get you to
Yeah,
spend like that. I'm sure you found yourself in that hobby phase that he talked about, where you could justify it by saying that you're committed, so this money isn't just
Being wasted.
blown. Yeah,
right.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's
and
going
I
into
I
something
always
that's for you.
justified it like, yeah, I made enough money, this is my hobby. People spend money on their hobby. Like, yeah, it's not a big deal. And it got to the point where I was like, all right, I had already committed this much money to it. I've got to, make it worth it. The next $100 pull will be where I get that character. And then it wouldn't come. And it wouldn't come. And it wouldn't come. And it got to the point where I was just like, all right, how many times do I need to pull to get this character? And it just, it fucked me up. I'll admit, like, it made me sick to my stomach that I would drop $500 in one sitting and not get the thing that I thought I was gonna get.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, trust me, you're definitely not the only one to have issues with that kind of stuff. Like, I never had any of the stuff with the mobile games, but at a point in my life when I was around 18, 19 years old, it was the trading card thing that got me with this type of deal.
mhm,
And Mark, this is actually one of the reasons I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh for a while. Because when I was in my first years of college, um, I was going to school, working, and didn't have to worry about school loans to pay back at the time. Um, it was convenient for me to go like 5-10 minutes down the road, and at the end of the week, I'm like, I want to buy a box of cards from this set just to open the packs and see what I get. That's okay, like once a month, once every 2-3 months, not like 3-4 times a month.
mhm.
So that can be problematic too, but it's kind of bored down at the same thing. So, eventually you get to the point where you're like, what am I doing? Why am I spending this much?
Yeah.
And, for you, that wake up call was, getting a call from your card company thinking that it was, some sort of fraudulent spending and having to basically hide it from people.
Mhm.
And, at that point, even for me, with the cards itself, I was buying them, but really had nobody to play the game with. So I finally thought to myself, like, why am I bothering to do this anymore? Like, you finally have that moment where you have that wake up call, and it's kind of sobering.
Yeah.
And you realize, like, how much you've kind of wasted. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, and when I was in the middle of it, I always kind of like went back to that, like, that platitude of, time spent enjoyed was not time wasted. That's kind of like I twisted that in such a way, like, money spent enjoyed was not money wasted. But no,
Yeah.
like, money was wasted. Clearly, money was wasted. And
Mm.
it just, when I see videos like this where it's, the person's telling you, you're not the only person to struggle with this. That was like, I mean, I don't want to say it takes away kind of like the accountability because, I'm an adult. I should know better, you know?
Mhm.
But it kind of like is an explanation, not a justification, that it's designed in that way to make you that way. It's designed to trick you to be that way. And
Well, I think another thing that tends to happen too is it tends to take advantage of people. Like at the age that was happening to you, you were what,
like
22,
like
22,
early
21,
20s.
22?
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the time it happened to me, it was my late teenage years. Now, there again, I mean, I at least still have the product of the result. I actually have the physical product I bought for, but at the same time, I think a lot of times the type of people this winds up preying on also are people who are beneath that age range of like 25, where they say your brain is kind of, your mental development is kind of, finally done by that point. Um, Ironically enough, it's the same age range where, if you're going to a college and you're taking loans out, they kind of ask you to, sign a thing of a major amount of money you're going to have to pay back when you're 18 or 19, and you're thinking it's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily the same deal, but it's the concept of what kind of consequences come from those actions don't really hit you until later on,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing that kind of stuff at that age.
Yeah.
So, like, 10 years after the fact, it's a lot easier to see, like, yeah, that was dumb. Why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily for, a school loan type of deal. You kind of need that to get a degree, but you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah, so this is actually a good segue into something that I wanted to talk about, which is another discussion that's always brought up when people talk about microtransactions, specifically with loot boxes, like some of the things we're talking about here. Do you guys believe that buying loot boxes in games is equivalent to gambling?
I like to tend to lean towards yes, simply because there's that randomness factor. It's kind of like sitting there in front of a slot machine, putting in, quarters into a slot machine and pulling the handle, and watching, bright. Because, I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, Jim Sterling kind of goes in and starts to talk about that, the flashiness of, going in, and once you hit, spend, it starts to flash bright colors, kind of like a slot machine. It brings up random pictures of what you just pulled, like a slot machine. And then sometimes there's a jackpot payout, and sometimes you're left with nothing of substance, at least.
Right. I mean, I guess before I kind of get to the part that piggybacks on that, I would say, you said it's like gambling. I would essentially say it is gambling. At least in my mind. Part of the reason being is because you are essentially getting something that has, different odds. It's not a set thing you're actually getting, and if it costs money, you're gambling. And what's even worse is that, like, you don't even have a physical product to hold on to afterwards.
Yep.
Like, it's not like, you go and, spend $5 on a lottery ticket. Okay, well, you either win something or you don't, but you had the ticket, you had the chance to go through the game and see if you won something, whether you were going to or not.
Well,
In this case,
I wouldn't dismiss the physicality of it as a defining feature, because there are a lot of people who prize digital goods. I mean, especially with the current trend of NFTs, for example, and
that's true.
even outside the gaming industry. So
yeah, thinking of things like with what's it called, Counter-Strike. People are selling cosmetics for their weapons and their gear and shit like that, and there's clear value in those items with how rare they are.
Absolutely.
But when you think of things like, Call of Duty or the Walking Dead Road to Survival or Clash of Clans, there's no trading between accounts. That money that you spend.
There's no way you can actually sell it to somebody. If you get a repeat of something you had before, it's essentially worthless.
Yeah, and it's one thing to be able to, flip something that you get in like a pull on, say you spend money on like Rust and you try and get cosmetics on Rust. You can then go ahead and sell whatever you don't want for, obviously a fraction of the value of the item, but you can still recuperate some sort of losses. In I think what Jim Sterling is talking about, it's where there's no opportunity for any amount of remuneration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, Mark, this was such a big deal, and that it almost wound up becoming a major issue in U.S. Legislature, and kind of the catalyst around it. I know exactly when you guys wanted to talk about this, but the catalyst was Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Yeah, we can get into that one. Yeah, but before we go into that like whole offshoot, I just I just want to say that we might have an opportunity for an interesting conversation right here, because I'm actually on the stance that loot boxes are not gambling.
Okay,
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Interesting.
let's hear it.
Yeah, so for me, it all boils down to what you end up with as your end product for putting in that money. Because yes, I mean both loot boxes that you pay money for in games, both and gambling, they both involve spending your actual money, and they both involve chance. But for me, the big defining difference is that when you're gambling, there is a very real chance that you could lose absolutely everything. There's no guarantee of you walking away with any of your money at all. Whereas with something like a loot box or trading cards, whatever you want to talk about, you're always ending up with something. So for me, it's I wouldn't call it gambling, and then people have been saying that loot boxes are gambling, but you brought up trading cards, Russ, which I
Mhm.
think is funny because that's actually one of the examples that I use to support my argument. Because you could open up a pack of trading cards, and you have your odds of what you may or may not get. You
Right.
have those that set chance for whatever pack of cards you're opening up. But at the end of the day, when
You
you
still
open
have
that
the
up,
cards.
right, you're getting something, which is why I wanted to make that distinction between physical and digital goods, because no matter what, you're still ending up with something. You're not losing everything. You don't have that chance to lose everything. And I think it's mainly up to people understanding what kind of risk they want to take on, and whether or not it's profitable enough for them to to make that risk and take that chance by putting their money into that thing. Now, like as we're talking about right now, publishers have come up with very devious ways to get people to spend money. But regardless of the thought process that goes towards that purchase before you actually put your money in there,
Hmm.
um, no matter what, you're still ending up with something. And it was growing up, I would collect baseball cards, and that was never, yeah, obviously I collect other cards today, but for example, when I was growing up collecting baseball cards, that was never a part of the conversation. But to me, seems very similar. You're putting in money, you're taking a chance to get something. You could get what you want. Maybe you'll end up with junk, but you can take that chance and see what happens. And you're always going to have something.
Well, actually, you do make a good point, and there's something you mentioned that, and I probably should not be quite so draconian with my saying of it's absolutely gambling this, that, or the other thing. It's like with most answers that take a while to explain. It depends. I would have said had loot boxes stayed roughly the way they were originally, it would have been gambling. But there's a key difference there. Like when you're talking about opening up a pack of baseball cards or Magic cards, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever you're playing,
Mhm.
there's a set amount of odds for each rarity of card you get, right?
Yeah.
So it's my understanding, as far as I remember, that prior to some states actually starting to address the issue of loot boxes, there were no set odds published for loot boxes.
Yeah, I think
And
I remember that coming out in court hearings, that now companies, after that point, companies had to actually disclose their odds. Yeah.
right, and in that case, once you start doing that, I think it does approach more that level of like a trading card type of situation. The only thing that's iffy for me when it comes time for um, getting a physical product back is the fact that many games anymore, especially when you wind up, going through the end user license agreement, is that usually what you have in the game or the game itself is not necessarily yours to own. It's more or less licensed to you.
Right.
So
Yeah. You
that's
go by a video game. That disc is really more of a license. You don't actually own it, right?
right, which means that, things that you may spend money on in a loot box type of situation, whereas you may have them to use in the game, you don't actually own them. The only thing you own is literally the physical disc that if you even bought it with a physical disc. If you
Mhm.
didn't, then you really don't own anything. It's just licensed to you to use. In which case, you're not really owning the stuff you're getting in the loot box. It's still owned by the company who's licensing the software to you,
But
essentially.
but you could say that you own the license. You do own that.
That's true, but I think, that kind of gets into the weeds about like who owns what, and functionally you are correct though, because at least you get to use it.
Mhm.
Um,
Plus, yeah, it would just be it would reflect very poorly on any company that would take back those rights after you've spent money to get a license for something, you know?
right, and the thing is that it would. You're exactly right. It would reflect poorly back on them. So a lot of companies like let me ask you this, Joe, because I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but when you went back to that Walking Dead mobile game, did you find that the stuff that you had that you used several years prior was now completely outmoded and out
Oh,
of date by the standards of the game?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the characters that I had spent money on were completely obsolete at that point, to the point where the game was encouraging you to recycle those characters into newer characters.
Right,
So,
and on the opposite side of that, you could say the same thing happens for a trading card thing. It's not like I can, go take my, base set Charizard and expect to go win a modern day Pokemon tournament with it, you know? Um, but I guess the issue there is, um, depreciation of value. And I'm getting way too far into financial stuff with it now, but I think it's a small distinction between the two, but I kind of land on the side of gambling for one particular reason. And the reason I land on it is because I do think it's something that needs to at least be, I, I won't say regulated to have like the negative connotation that goes with it, more or less the idea of publishing of odds, and it has to be restricted around certain age groups. Like you can't be having kids who are 12 or 13, having their parents' credit card on their system and going nuts buying loot boxes every once again because they may not quite understand the concept of. I won't say they won't understand the concept of it, but won't grasp the magnitude of
yeah,
what they're
it's
doing.
The
it's
repercussions.
because they're like a level of degree of separation between that. It's not my money, it's my parents' money, you know.
Right, exactly. There's tons of stories of, kids racking up, these huge bills on their parents' credit cards because, they bought a whole bunch of loot boxes. Now, here's the issue, of course, to some extent, the responsibility does lie with the parents as well. It's a
Yeah, for
little
sure.
ridiculous to have, your credit card number stored on a system your kids are using when they could possibly buy something with it. Um,
Mhm.
that to me does, lie with the parents as well, responsibility wise.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, shame on the publisher for giving people those kinds of options and funneling people down that rabbit hole. But also, you know, y- as a parent, if you're gonna have your kid playing with your phone and going on these sorts of games, you do need to be aware of what they're doing because of these sorts of practices that are out there for
Yeah,
sure.
and
absolutely.
Jim Sterling actually addresses that very issue in this video. So I know we're having like a really great conversation, but what do you say we hop back into the video and see if we can spark something else?
Yeah,
Sure.
Russ,
Oh, go ahead.
did you want to like continue your train of thought there? Because I didn't want to cut you off before we start the
Um,
video again.
no, the main train of thought where I was going eventually was to talk about Battlefront 2, but I think we can hold off on that one because
Okay.
I can't
Yeah.
wait to talk about that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's why I
think
figured I wanted to pull us back to this conversation because I knew as soon as you mentioned Battlefront 2, we might have been entering new waters there.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I think Battlefront 2 it kind of deserves its own spot. So how about we save
Yeah.
that till at least after the end of Jim Sterling's video? What do you say?
Sure,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
trust me, I'm not going to forget about my thoughts about it.
Yep. I don't expect you to either.
All right, let's
Just
go.
wait until I bring in The Last Jedi to talk about it.
All right, let's hop back in.
Mhm.
Oh, you're waiting on me to press play. Gotcha.
Let's look
Yes.
at a very different statement. A statement not from a whale hunter, but the brother of a so-called whale himself. A whale with a very genuine gambling problem whose love of video games helped him deal with that problem, only for said games to stab him in the back when money was to be made.
When my brother came of working age, he found work as a chef and is still one. It's early morning to late at night hard work, so on the weekends he got into gambling. Casinos, betting slips, horses, everything except online gambling. It got so bad my family had to actively manage his money and help him to stop burning his entire paycheck on this shit, as it meant he never saved money to move out. This eventually worked after months, and he started spending his free days playing video games, FIFA and Call of Duty. We always played COD together growing up, and we all agreed this was far healthier. Stupid me never took any notice of loot boxes, so I didn't click that this might be a problem. After another few months, he was always asking for money for this and that. Eventually, my parents had enough and found out that he needed the money because he was spending the majority of his salary and savings on loot boxes in FIFA, literally thousands of pounds. My parents now control his accounts and give him a weekly allowance. He's a grown man, for Christ's sake. He is not a rich person throwing money at a game to make it more affordable for us. He's a working class man who used loot boxes as a direct substitute to old world gambling. I was back for the summer to work for him to make some quick money, went back to play COD with him, and what do you know, it's COD World War II, and I noticed the fucking loot boxes. A little part of me sank when I saw that. Hope he finds a better way to deal with it.
I thought it was Harris Brewer. I knew he was the one doing that. I thought he was the one doing the narration.
Yep.
I wasn't sure. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Interruptions are welcome.
Wales.
No, I was going to
So
say
Palace-
that guy's channel, H Bomber guy. He talks about some of that stuff too. I thought his voice sounded familiar, but I mean, he literally just kind of talked a bit about what we just mentioned as well. Is that his brother was addicted to gambling, and it's standard form in person, and basically this just became a substitute for it. Whether it's technically gambling or not, it definitely filled that gambling void.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
All right.
These are the whales, so callously hunted by assholes with lanyards. It's very easy to suggest that these are people who should just be smarter with the money, that only a fool lets it get this bad. I refuse to believe that anyone that churlish about the situation has ever dealt with addictive behavior in their own lives. I simply refuse to believe it, because addiction simply does not work that way. You can't just switch it off. It's not that easy to simply stop. You can even know all day long that what you're doing is wrong, and you can consider yourself stupid, and you can know that it's harmful, but that won't stop you. It doesn't just stop on a dime, and the game industry knows this.
I feel personally attacked by that statement. Cause honestly, yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I knew what I was doing was incredibly, what's the word I'm looking for, Russ?
In what context? I'm sorry.
Just like, we're
Irresponsible?
yes, that's the word. Irresponsible. Yeah, like I knew how absolutely irresponsible my spending was, and I recognized it. But it took me a while to actually ask for help and go, this is what's happening. I need your help.
Well, I think the biggest part of it is that, recognizing that it's irresponsible is kind of the first step in stopping it. The biggest hurdle that everybody faces is the impending sense of shame that you're going to feel when you tell somebody, shame that they're going to have in you for, having, fallen for that in the first place. But the thing is that, maybe in years past, it might have been something that was more easily condemned. But as more is studied about fields of addiction, including this as well, the understanding of it is starting to get a lot more ubiquitous, to the point where people are like, okay, this is a problem that needs to be solved, instead of a, how could you do that? That was dumb and you shouldn't have done that type of thing.
Yeah. All right. Continue.
That's why they go after those who will form habits. As we've already noted, addiction doesn't tend to form in a bubble. It more often than not is a symptom of and a response to other mental health issues. And it's not uncommon to find an addict with multiple chronic habits. In this next testimonial, we learn once again how easy it can be for the right victim to fall prey to the subtle machinations of video game gambling, as well as how those in recovery for addiction are playing a dangerous game when all they want to do is play an actual game.
I spent a good portion of my life constantly high and wasting all of my money on drugs. I met my partner, now fiancé, in World of Warcraft, and with her help, I finally managed to get sober. One big part of going through rehab and trying to control my addictive behaviors, one of the things I learned was to try and find a healthy replacement for the substance. Obviously, being a chronically ill hermit and geek that I am, I turned my focus back to my childhood love of video games. This, ironically, was around the time of the beta of Overwatch, and me and my WoW guildies loved it. It was so much fun. I loved the idea of collecting cosmetics, for my favourite characters, as I am a big collector and naturally fell into the trap of loot boxes. I kept getting sucked in with the spend more to get more trap that a lot of publishers use to get people spending. I lost track of the amount of money I spent, but thanks to rehab, I could quickly identify that this was dangerous behavior, and I quit playing the game.
So that's kind of like an important point that I'd like to touch on, because he's right, it kind of does just like sneak up on you, because going back to kind of my story about how I ended up going from only spending 20 to 30 bucks to 500 in one sitting was, I just spent a little bit of money. And in those types of games, with the mobile games and even in these AAA games to a certain extent, the more money you spend on the in-game currency to make those purchases, you get like 10% more. If you spend, instead of 30, you get, or instead of spending 10, you spend 30, and you get a little bit more of that in-game currency.
They want you to spend more and buy in wholesale.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Costco principle, except, you can't go buy toilet paper wholesale in a video game, so a little bit different.
Unless it's a toilet paper purchasing simulator.
Yeah, the future of games isn't here yet. Not yet.
It'll be here eventually. But you're exactly right. Like they do that because the kind of psychological trap they're making people fall into is the fact that, most of us think, well, okay, well, if I'm getting more for spending a higher amount, the amount per unit of whatever I'm spending is less per unit, so obviously that's a better deal, so I should do that. When in reality, you're talking about a unit that basically, I wouldn't say has no value, but the game company could put any number of them that they wanted to there at the price point they chose. And if somebody continues to play the game, it's because they decided to pay at the price point the game company told you. So the other part of that, that's, it kind of works off of this mentality that most of us go with, that we're always looking for a sale because we want to consider ourselves the smart, savvy shopper or, gamer when it comes time for that kind of stuff. So if we get ourselves what we think to be a better deal, we'll be more likely to say, yeah, this is definitely something that I have an easier time buying than if it were regular price.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, let's continue on with that video.
I spent the next few years jumping from game to game, leaving when the microtransactions got too much to bear. Rift was a nice distraction from WoW, and I had played it from beta, and then it went free to play with loot boxes as well as a cash shop. Guild Wars 2, cash shop and loot boxes. Deus Ex, a series I treasure, microtransactions. Assassin's Creed Origins, same thing. The place where I once found distraction and salvation is now preying upon my addictive nature and impulse spending problems. It hurts, it really does. I have had to turn away from $100 Australian games because they've implemented microtransactions, and the idea of popping in a few bucks to make life easier is so tempting, and I keep falling for it, again and again. My fiancé has now taken away both my debit card and my PayPal details to try and curb this. It's a weird mentality of, it's only here for a limited time, and if I don't get it now, I may never get it again and not complete my collection.
Yep, that's that fear of missing out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Nintendo, Mario, new All-Star trilogy there.
Oh, or the amiibos. Ugh. Let's not even talk about secondary markets, or not even that. A game we've, several of us have played before. The different skins or costumes in something like Smite, where it shows, a skin that was only available for a limited time, and chooses to continue to show it even though you can't get it anymore.
That's true. Smite's a good one to bring up because we were just recently playing that within the past couple of months, and yeah, that's one thing that I was thinking about earlier when we were speaking about these things, and yeah, it's worth pointing out that with that game, even that one, pretty predatory because, like we were talking about before, and like the video was addressing, it starts out where you're leveling up really quickly, and they're giving you lots of free in-game currency
Mm-hmm.
and these the gems that you would normally pay for, and all sorts of free stuff at a fast pace. And you start spending it thinking that that's the pace you're always going to earn that at. But then that
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 drip feed
honeymooning
slows down. Yeah.
the honeymooning period kind of runs out, and then you're out of that currency and you're committed to the game, and then that's when you start thinking about spending your own money so you can get some of these in-game items for sure.
No, you're exactly right, and I think that's I I think that's the thing that's always kind of driven me away from certain free to play games. Because I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't play any free to play games on my own. Typically, it's usually a friend, like, in a group of friends or a group of people playing together type of thing, where, even if we don't all have access to like the newest or the greatest in the game, it's more or less just the fun of actually doing that together. But I find myself um, getting kind of turned off by the idea of playing a free to play game where I know somebody who's out there playing the game, every day for several hours at a time and has pumped a ton of money into the game is, basically going to be out there just wiping the floor with everybody and basically making an experience that I don't necessarily find much enjoyment in on my own.
Yeah, it's a shame to see these kinds of practices in games, like with the person here in the story. They have to shy away from certain games that they normally would have liked to play. It's a shame that they're looking for games to be their refuge, as it is for millions and millions of people. But because of these new practices, they can't fully do that for
Yeah.
fear of running into microtransactions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Let's see what's next.
I may never get it again and not complete my collection. Hitting that buy now button, seeing the rewards pop up, the spinning of the dice or slot wheels ticking past the rare loot, the just one more rationale, it completely overrules any common sense like you need this money to pay rent or your medical bills or food.
When game industry mouthpieces claim
Yeah, quick aside there. I wonder if in the future, if games with microtransactions like this and these kinds of slot type of mechanics, I wonder if they should have a big Surgeon General's warning on the back of the case, like a pack of cigarettes or something.
Or like on the front of the case.
Yeah,
Well,
that
I
too.
mean, I could definitely see it happening at some point in the future. I mean, we're just starting to get to a point where mental health is becoming a much more normalized type of thing. I mean, there was a point in time where you had like, doctors doing testimonials about, the smoothness of cigarettes, 67, 60, 70 years ago. Um, I could definitely see a point where we might have something like that, or at least some sort of like small disclaimer down the bottom
I
of
think
something.
I
Yeah.
think maybe there might be some games now that do
Yeah.
specify if a game has microtransactions.
Yeah.
Like I know in the App Store it'll say like this has in-app purchases,
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure there is like a thing where game companies now, I don't know if it's necessarily required, but they have been putting it onto the front of the box as like a little label. And I think that might have just been mandated by the ESRB to indicate that there is in-game purchases, or
Good.
that
I'm
you
glad.
have.
I'm glad
Yeah.
to hear that because they should.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just to alert somebody like that, that particular testimony we were just listening to, finding out that all these games have microtransactions, they'd be able to steer clear of it if they found out it was something that was, already in the game before they even start playing. But the thing I thought that was really sad that I kept hearing was that he kept listing off all these different game franchises that he enjoyed playing, and one by one they started adding microtransactions into the game.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the biggest issue that has led to is one, um, just like anything else, game companies imitate what they see that works that other companies do. So if they see one company doing well with monetization, they think, well, it basically prints money for us, so why don't we add it into our game too? But on the other side of it, part of it also has to do with the cost of production for games as well, and the fact that the price of a full price game hasn't changed in what, 30 years almost, close to it.
Right, but
It's
even
been six.
still,
It's been
Yeah,
six.
but even
yeah.
still, but in that, not this this person's story, but the previous testimonial, the person said, my brother was not someone who could throw money around. They aren't making it cheaper to produce because they're spending money. He's like you and me. He doesn't make that much money. He can't afford to spend. You know?
Right.
And that's the shame of all of it. You think like people that spend a lot of money on these games are people that, you know, they've got, you know, more money than they know what to do with. But
You think it's some rich guy's kids.
yeah. But
Yeah, some guy who's making like, you know, $150,000, $200,000 a year, and it's like, yeah, Dad, can I have the credit card to spend like a few $100 on this game? I'm like, yeah, sure, here you go.
yeah,
But
but
most of the time, they're people who, you know, are trying to look for some sort of, you know, some sort of breakaway from what they do for a living, and basically, it's turned their pastime into a casino in their home to
Yeah.
some extent.
mhm.
Wouldn't it be great if we could get back to a point when you could fire up a game and you wouldn't see a single dollar sign unless that game's currency happened to be dollars?
There are still a good bit of games that are like that, and ironically enough, even though you mentioned Nintendo before with the whole amiibo thing, which I thought was
When
absolutely
you brought up
ridiculous.
amiibos, I was talking about
Oh,
how
you're
Nintendo
right. You're
did
right with
that,
the 3D All Stars. You're right.
Mario trilogy. Yep.
No, you're exactly right. I was the one who mentioned the amiibos, but you know, even with their design shortages of it, most of the time, their games, their first party games, are good about not having it, and part of it is because a good bit of them are designed to be, you know, geared towards younger gamers as well as older. So I could definitely understand why they don't want to run afoul of, you know, parents who are buying those games for their kids. I could definitely understand, and that's not to say there aren't ones for PlayStation or Xbox or PC that, you know, that don't have any microtransactions either. It just seems like it's a higher percentage of those ones, and obviously because those systems tend to be having games geared more towards those who have their own money to spend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to continue with the video?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Microtransactions and loot boxes are fine because nobody's forced to buy them. I think of those who have had to move from video game to video game, actively pursued by the microtransactions that threatened to drag them back down the hole. The industry loves to claim it's optional to justify microtransactions, willfully ignoring how video games are designed to be grindier and less convenient to make their time-saving in-game purchases way more appealing. None of us have the option to avoid deliberately bad game design in the video games we buy. And those with shopping addiction and gambling addiction have no option to even play these games without the risk of slipping back into destructive behaviour. Now, I've shared my disgust with the video game industry here many times. Some understand my outrage, others not so much. It is my hope that with these testimonials juxtaposed against the sheer negligent insensitivity of men like Torolf Jernstrom will go some way to explaining why an addict like myself, who would more than likely be a victim of in-game gambling, were I not already so professionally against it, would be so utterly fucking furious at what the video game industry has encouraged in recent years. The industry not only knows what it's doing, it's celebrating it. It's doing it in public, at conferences and in calls, sharing the knowledge and the tactics that instill habitual spending among their audiences. There is a veritable treasure trove of evil fucking wisdom out there that doesn't attempt to hide how predatory this industry has become. None of this is a secret. None of this is obscure. This is out in the open.
Hot State. There's an excellent book about behavioral psychology called Thinking Fast and Slow. I'm telling you that the fast thinking mode is what you want. The slow thinking is your analytical brain. What's 12 times 47? I'm sure all of you can answer that, but you have to start your actual thinking brain to do that. Our brain works in these two modes, and starting the analytical part of your brain is too much to ask for a spend. Make stuff immediately useful, immediate gratification. If you have a level-based game and you sell some boosters up front, for instance, a coin doubler or some other stuff that will help you, people will have to analyze and think it through. These things are good for me, these will help me progress before they do it. If on the other hand you do, like for instance in this temple run, once your game is over, save me, I have a few seconds to spend hard currency and I get to continue. The IKEA effect. This is to say, stuff that we put work into, we value more highly. You know, IKEA really sells you cardboard stuff. It's shit. But you value it still somehow slightly higher because you actually built it yourselves. There's a trigger to remind us to do something. Then we go do an action. We get the variable reward, just like the gachas. We get the lottery ticket. And then, to really hook it down, we need to ask people to do something for us, do a little bit of work, because then they become emotionally attached to that. Anchoring is fun. Anchoring means that when we don't know the price of stuff, the first price we hear suggested for it becomes our anchor, and then we compare everything to that. Some games, immediately when you're in the tutorial, they suggest to you, you should buy this good IAP for 50 euros or something like that. I go like, oh, that's expensive, I'll never do that. Of course no, and I expect them to say no. Then again I come back like, a few sessions later and suggest they buy it for 15. And I'll say, that's a good value, because my anchor was at 50.
Get people to knee-jerk spend, to not think about what they're doing as they're doing it. Keep the pressure up with limited offers, fixed prices to make each spend more appealing. Get players a sense of emotional as well as financial investment. Maintain the sunk cost fallacy as long as possible. Everything I've ever ranted and raved about on the Gymquisition is not only supported, but gloated over by people in the industry, right down to the bullshit excuses I've had to demolish before, such as spreading the nonsense that microtransactions are required in order to support developers. In fact, Jernstrom notes that you don't even have to be all that convincing in your lies.
If we tell people they are a certain way, if we compliment them on being nice, good citizens, they are more likely to behave as nice, good citizens. So you should actually tell your players that they are generous individuals who have a taste for good art and want to support their game developers by paying you and buying IAPs. Related to that, also to telling people the reason to do something makes them much more likely to actually follow through and do that. Spend because reasons. The reasons don't even have to be that good in order for this to work.
The total bollocks spouted on behalf of the game industry justifying aggressive microtransactions and gambling mechanics is not only perpetuated by people within the industry, but people without it as well. And it's always dismaying to me to see games media, games journalism, structures that should hold the industry to account going to bat for them. Most recently, and most disgustingly, there was an article on Polygon called Anti-Loot Box Bill Poses a Real Threat to Sports Video Games, with the tagline, how else are these billion-dollar licenses paid? Fuck you. These modes, if they don't directly pay for the games we enjoy, at least justify the workforces and development costs that make them worth playing. That oily microtransaction money, hard as it is to defend even in the abstract, helps those women and men deliver something that meets the unrelenting it's in the game standard we've taken for granted for a couple of decades. No, they don't. They were being delivered before microtransactions happened. You fool. And as we've already explained, the whole microtransaction support the developers line is bullshit. It's...
You know what? I want to talk about that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was actually going to pause there too, because it's that's definitely something I want to talk about. What do you want to say?
Okay, so when they're trying to tap the line out there that this money is supporting the developers to help them put out a good game, especially for sports games, boy, that has some stories to tell.
I knew you were going to bring this up. The moment he mentioned sports games, I was like, ooh,
you betcha.
Here he
because
goes.
I've been a fan of the NHL series for years. I'm a pretty avid hockey fan. And I started back up again with the series in like 2008. Okay, game was good. It's for the 360. Basically just franchise mode, and that was pretty much about it. But as time went on, they started to introduce the Ultimate Team mode. And for those that don't know, Ultimate Team modes in EA Sports games are basically kind of like getting packs of trading cards in the game itself. And you get these players with particular overall ratings that you use to play games. which would be fine if the players didn't have a limit of how many games they can play, if I remember correctly. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, certain cards will give you.
Last longer than others.
Yeah, and I mean, the rarer cards typically will last longer, but you
Right.
know, you're
So
kind
not only are you basically taking a gambling system on the loot box, slapping a trading card system on top of it, you're also putting a lifetime essentially on or a set amount of time on how long you can use that particular card you get for. And here's the best part, the part that makes my blood boil and makes me kind of see the bad, is they said, well, they needed to make sure the game is a state of the art experience. If I had $1 for every time the non-online microtransaction parts of an NHL game were buggy or didn't work well or had ice tilt, and for those that don't know that, that's that feeling in a sports game you get when it feels like the game wants to make you lose a particular game. I'm sure any of us who have played sports games have that feeling before. If I had $1 for every time that happened in games, NHL games, since they started introducing the Ultimate Team modes, I'd be wealthy. I would be absolutely stinking rich, and the reason for it is because that part of the game doesn't make the money.
of.
The Ultimate Team part makes the money, and I've literally said, I said this to Joe, I've seen for the past 6 years worth of NHL games basically be the same exact game 6 times with a roster update, slap
Yeah.
a fresh coat of paint on there, and update the Hockey Ultimate Team mode, and bam, get it on out there to market and charge $60 for it before you start charging extra money for the Ultimate Team mode on that, and
Yeah,
it's absolutely infuriating.
I don't have the exact numbers. I could have looked this up beforehand, but I know, like, speaking of the Ultimate Teams, I've heard that EA makes a sizable chunk of its profits off of the
Oh,
FIFA
absolutely.
Ultimate Team
Yep.
system. And it's funny that this is happening with sports games, and how, these publishers are able to make such crazy amounts of money by doing this with sports games, because that's something that people were, before microtransactions and all this became a topic, people were saying that they shouldn't even be releasing a new sports game every year. They should just be updating the rosters pretty
Yeah, because
much.
that's essentially what they're doing. You're spending $60 for an updated roster. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So
And
whenever I would hear people talk about sports games, they would they would say, like, "Oh yeah, not really much of a point in buying
yeah,
the new
and
game."
honestly, the shittiest part of these Ultimate Team things is you can spend money in Ultimate Team. Like, say you play Madden, you play Ultimate Team competitively, and you enjoy it, you do well. Every now and again, you get a free pack, so you get some decent cards, but you really want that ultimate legendary Tom Brady card because Tom Brady is always going to be the best quarterback. Hot take, I know. So you want that Tom Brady card, and so you spend and spend till you get him. What happens to Tom Brady next year when you buy the next game? Well, he carries over to the next game, but instead of being the ultimate legendary card that he was when you had him in the previous version, he's now a bronze card. He's a common card. He's
Yep.
no longer as good as he was in the game before. And you
Yep,
spent all
that's
that
exactly
money.
right.
You spent all that money to get him.
And you know what the worst
Laundered your
part is too?
players and made them worse.
Yep. And you know what the worst part is too? And this is something that even drove me nuts when it came time for NHL just on its own, is that, each of the players have attributes in different categories: offense, defense, skating, checking, all that kind of stuff. And you already can't tell much of a difference from one player to another, from top line to bottom of the fourth line half the time. So for them to continue and use that same system in a monetized system itself, you're basically just getting people to spend money to get something that may not even be appreciably better or even all that much more noticeably better on the ice or on the field. And
Mhm.
it's just there's a reason why EA was voted like the most hated company in America years on end. And you know what? At the end of the day, they really don't care because they still made their money anyway
Yeah, people are gonna pay it.
Yep.
and still somehow managed to get the Star Wars license.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but yeah, it made me want to bring up a different topic. He seems very dismissive in this video here about microtransactions, and how you need to support the developer of the game, the publisher of the game. Now, with the topics that we're talking about right here, and with the ultimate teams and that kind of stuff, obviously there's definitely some greed happening, but I mean, it can't be all bad, right? I mean, surely there are some companies out there that will actually benefit from these microtransactions, right? So they can keep bringing the kind of quality products that they're bringing. What do you guys think about that?
And you know what? That's interesting that you bring that up. And in this entire time we've watched this video, we've watched it for about, however, we've been streaming for a little over an hour, and we're about 19 minutes into the video. Not once has he brought up, microtransactions or in-game purchases for DLC or expansion packs for, I mean, yeah, cosmetics have been brought up, but like, what are your thoughts on specifically that, helping the developer by purchasing expansion packs or DLC packs?
I think Mark had mentioned the expansions for The Witcher 3 before. And you know
Yeah,
what?
those
I
two main
absolutely
story DLCs.
yeah. Was it Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine? I think it is.
Yes, that was it.
So those two expansions, I believe, both easily together add about 40 hours of playing time to the game.
It's pretty much an entirely new campaign with those. Yeah,
And
they're lengthy.
exactly. And in a situation like that, where a developer has made a strong addition to a game that you don't need to play to get the full experience of the game, but makes a nice add-on so you can continue to enjoy yourself in that game, absolutely. Absolutely,
Yeah.
they deserve that money as long as it's fairly priced. And I think they were about, 15 a piece? Something like that, 10, 15 a piece.
I actually don't remember because I kind of snoozed on Witcher 3, and
You got
I
the
got
Game of the Year edition.
yeah, I got the complete edition, so all
Yeah,
the
same
DLC
here.
was already on there.
Gotcha. And you know what? I actually bought the DLC, but it's been quite a few years, so I don't remember exactly how much they were. But I think I spent a little less than 30 on both of them. And considering how long the base game was, I absolutely had no issues supporting that by downloading those DLC and paying the money for it. That to me was a worthwhile expense, and I had no issues with
Yeah,
that. Although
definitely.
Cyberpunk may be a different story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Witcher DLC, that's definitely worthwhile stuff there because they made essentially, they're like short games in and of themselves,
Mhm.
not even just additions to the main game. They were kind of their own things. I mean, the first one, the Hearts of Stone, it took place in that same map as the
Mhm.
Witcher 3's story mode. But then, Blood and Wine, that was a whole new area. That was like its own game in and of itself. So part of me, I would say actually that DLC like that, where they're adding a substantial amount of story related content, something that feels like, you're playing more of that game. It's not just unlocking something for a couple bucks,
Mhm.
like a skin or whatever, but actually like something that you can play, something that is substantial
Yeah,
and can sink your
it's
teeth
an
into.
experience you're paying for.
It
And
basically
Yeah,
satisfies that want to play more of that game without having to restart your current game.
yeah.
yeah, it's more of the good stuff you like. So for DLC like that, story related stuff, I wouldn't even consider that part of the discussion. I
Hmm.
don't think that's problematic at all.
But then taking a look at a game that was released the exact same year, Fallout 4, there was, I want to say, 6 or 7 content packs that were released as DLC, and only
Mhm.
3 of them were story-based
Mm,
packs. So you had your Automatron, you had your what's it called? Far Harbor, and then you had your Nuka World. Those were your story packs. And then there was, contraptions where it was like a content pack for, settlement building, and you had several of those releases throughout to pepper in between the story modes. And they charged top dollar for those, asset packs essentially.
oh,
That could
gotcha.
have
Yeah.
been, free or included with Automatron, included with Far Harbor, or included
Oh
with
yeah, for
Nuka
sure.
World. But no, they didn't. It was, I want to say 15 or 20 bucks for the story driven ones, and then like 10 to 15 for the asset packs.
Yeah, that's crappy. I mean, the story-driven ones definitely that seems like a worthwhile purchase to me. But for something like assets, they could easily just patch that into the game and give that to players, or like you said, put it into a DLC. And it's a shame to see something like that, especially for you, Joe, because you're definitely the biggest Fallout fan out of all of us.
Yeah.
You know, you want as much Fallout as you can get. So if you have to you spend that money just for some assets and minor stuff like
Yeah,
that,
and
that's rough.
and the thing was, when Fallout 4 was announced, we were starved for a good Fallout game. I mean, Fallout New Vegas came out, and that was kind of like the saving grace of the Fallout series, because I mean, don't get me wrong, Fallout 3 was good. Fallout 3 was fun. Fallout 3 had some interesting stories, but it people described it as Oblivion but with guns. And
Yeah,
you know, kind of
it's funny
similar.
you say that
It's
because go on.
no, it's kind of similar to like people describing Fallout 4 as Skyrim with guns. You know, so like when Bethesda kind of, you know, contracted Obsidian, you know, a lot of people from the former Black Isle Studios who had originally developed the original two Fallout games, like they put their, you know, they had a year and a half to develop and release this game, and they put so much of their passion and so much of their love for the Fallout series because it was their baby. You know, they really did a great job with not only telling a great story, but giving you hefty DLC, story driven. You know, it's adds on extra to the overall narrative of the game. And so when Fallout 4 was released, I was like, hell fucking yeah, like I'm gonna get more of that. And it was just Fallout 4 was good for what it was when it came out, but looking back, it was
It pales in comparison to New Vegas.
yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Preston Garvey here. We need you to help out these settlements. They need defending.
Yeah, and I mean that can be another topic for another day with like the, you know, the automatically generated, you know, emergent quests in games. We can talk about that at a different time too for a different topic.
I think the big part of it too is because Fallout 4 was part of that trend of games that, you know, especially within the past few years, that have been obsessed with wanting to make sure people consistently stick with that game instead of it being like a single player experience where you start, you play the game, and then you get to the point where you end the game. They want you to continually come back to it over and over and over again. It's basically, you know, trying to farm replayability out of people, especially by, you know, allowing mods for the game. But then they're paid mods. Or
I don't know how much you want to continue with that train of thought, but why don't we could save that for next week's discussion? I think. I think you could
oh
definitely talk
yes,
about that
yes,
some-
you are
talk about that
exactly
even
right.
more.
Good call,
Yeah.
Marcus. Good call.
Mm.
All right.
All I'm gonna say is that I'm not surprised Fallout New Vegas was good because the same people that made Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Mm.
I said my piece.
All right, let's hop back in to see what else Jim Sterling has. We've got about 12 minutes or so.
Wait, quick.
Oh, yeah,
quick
yeah.
though. When I was jumping in before, I just wanted to say the whole Oblivion with guns thing. It was just funny that you mentioned that because I remember going into a Game Crazy. Do you guys remember Game Crazy attached to Hollywood Video?
No, I think we only have like one Hollywood video around this area when I was growing
Oh,
up.
you didn't have that by you guys? Oh man.
Nope.
No,
Yeah,
I
there
don't
are
remember that.
there are certain Hollywood videos that would have their own game store attached to it, and it was for buying games. They didn't rent them out there, so that was always fun to go in there. But I distinctly remember going in to a Game Crazy one time when Fallout 3 was about to come out, and there was a display where I guess one of the employees must have written their own little note on it and slapped it on the kiosk. It was just like, it's like Oblivion ... with guns. So,
Nice.
it's just a distinct memory that you jogged that
It unlocks
figured I
something
should
in your
share.
lizard brain.
Yes, yeah, definitely for sure. So that's just thought that was funny.
All right. Welcome back, Jim.
It's bullshit. The routine layoffs this industry has, often to celebrate things like record revenue intake, wholly demonstrates that. People are losing their jobs all the time, regardless of how much money is flowing into the industry. The article essentially boils down to, won't somebody please think of the corporations? And relies on the age-old myth that video games are just too expensive for multi-billion-dollar companies to make them anymore. In doing so, the article does hit upon a very real problem, but the understanding of the problem presented is completely fucked. Nobody publicises exactly how much their cash cows bring in, of course, but it's instructive that Take-Two agreed to a deal paying the NBA $1.1 billion over the next 7 years. That's double the value of the last deal, which was inked in 2011, well before virtual currency was introduced to my career. I don't think Visual Concepts replaces that dough by reselling NBA's greatest DLC or the Sprite Slam Dunk Contest. Polygon's writer suggests that sports games would suffer under recent pushes to regulate loot boxes because the licenses for the sports in question are now costing billions, and it's frustrating because the writer is so close to the truth there, so close to the issue, but decides the best solution is to put gambling mechanics in these fucking video games rather than ask why a sports association is charging so much bloody money for the rights to make a game that said association directly benefits from.
And like the thing that still kind of blows my mind is all of these sports games, what are they rated?
What, E for everyone?
Yeah.
Usually?
Yeah, so like children are playing these games.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you have gambling mechanics in your game and you're a major part of your audience is children, we've got a big dilemma here, guys.
That's true. And you know what? He hit on a good point too. He said, why the licenses are so expensive. The licenses are so expensive because they know that the companies can make money out of those virtual currencies through the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's the sports sports league getting its beak wet before the company does. But here's the thing, in certain sports situations, EA has a monopoly on the rights to those sports. Nobody else can produce any football games. Nobody else can produce any hockey games.
Soccer games too, probably.
I'm guessing FIFA probably.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing there is that they essentially, they're also paying for the right to monopolize on it. Sure, the license is a lot, but I guarantee it'd probably be a lot less if you wound up having companies saying, no, I don't want to pay for that much, because I guarantee you most of the sports leagues would not say, okay, well, we just won't have a video game this year. That's a moneymaker for them. It's a thing that gets people's attention. People want to play as their favorite sports teams. And the thing is, he's right. Why are they not asking why they're paying that much for the license? And part of it's because everybody's making money except for the people who have the game.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that brings me back to what I was saying, though, during our last pause that we never really looped around to. Like I was saying before, there's definitely a lot of greed going on, with the things that we're talking about now. But do you think that there are companies out there that actually are doing it correctly? Do you think the way that the video game industry is now, do you think it necessitates some kind of extra monetization, and that's why we really have things like microtransactions and loot boxes and that sort of thing? Because like you mentioned before, Russ, you were saying about how the price of games hasn't really changed much in the past 30 years.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look back to like an old, even like say an early 90s catalog with a bunch of like video games,
like a Super Nintendo. Yeah.
Right. Prices were more all over the place there. It wasn't just $60 for your average game.
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
Game. Sometimes you would get $50 games, sometimes you would get $60 games, but back then you would also see a Super Nintendo game, for example, selling for $70.
Yeah.
Or I know like it's kind of a niche example, but the Neo Geo, which I never had. I don't know anybody who. It's not a system I didn't even know about its existence until much further down the road when I was an adult. But I think those games for that system came out and they retailed for like $200.
Jesus Christ!
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the system itself was like around $700, and that's early 90s money. It might have been more, maybe my numbers. But point is, games back then were the same price or even more expensive sometimes than what
And
they're
they are
selling
now.
for now. And back in the 90s, you could definitely get away with throwing a dozen nerds into a room with some computers and churning out a really solid game. But
No, that's a
nowadays,
fair point.
yeah, some of these games they have such high production values where you can see the pores on a character's face, just such great detail, such massive undertakings. The games industry is bigger than the film industry at this point. So I have to wonder, you know, what do developers really need to do to stay afloat and keep up with those kind of costs and that kind of competition to stay relevant?
Honestly,
They need.
I would actually be okay with if they said across the board we're going to raise the price of video games to $70, but there's no more microtransactions. No, obviously that's not going to happen. But if raising the price of games from $60 to $70 cut out all microtransactions, I'd be absolutely all over that because you know what? That would be a much better way to do it because it's probably what should have happened somewhat years ago. Now, you're right, exactly. You could have gotten away with a dozen people programming the game in the early '90s and had it be a smash hit. Now it's basically like working in a film studio with the number of people you have working on it.
Yeah.
Um,
I like to
but you
watch the
also have to remember
credits
too,
when
a
I
much
finish a
larger
game.
number.
I like to sit there and just kind of reflect on the experience I just had when I finish a game.
Yeah.
And sometimes the credits go on forever. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, look at all these people who went into making this one game.
True. And the other part of it too that you also have to remember is that you have a much larger install base of people now with video games than you did in the '90s too. So that's another part of it. Let's say maybe you were selling the video game to, I don't know, I'm going to use a round figure, 100 million people between like the US and Europe in the early '90s. Sure, why not? At $60 a game, well, I mean, you're talking a lot less money than if you have like a billion people, you know.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. I mean, they're definitely the prices to make games is definitely going up, but there's also more people playing games today, so it's more people buying them for sure. I see what you're saying.
Right.
No, and you're exact. Go ahead, Joe. Before
No,
I,
no,
yeah.
no, no. Like my solution for this problem would be to make a good game. I know it sounds kind of reductive and simplistic, but
Nope, that's about what I was going to say.
The better your product is, the more people
The more it will sell.
Right. So like a game like Witcher 3 did so well because it was so well crafted and everyone really enjoyed that game and people were willing to spend their money on that game, including the expansion packs. So like I honestly think if say a company like EA takes a step back and goes, "Okay, guys, next year Madden, FIFA, we're cutting out Ultimate Team. We're going back in and we're going to revamp franchise mode. And we're going to just allow people to play competitively with online teams. We're going to give them in-game currency that they can earn by playing online to purchase these packs, right? We're going to take out all of the microtransactions and we're going to make it more stable. We're going to make it look prettier. We're going to make franchise mode good again, guys."
I think you'd have a large number of people who would applaud the move, but you'd have a very small and vocal minority that would say it's ridiculous that they're taking that out of the game because they enjoy their Ultimate Team mode,
well,
even though it's kind of a cancer upon the sports game
Another
industry.
vocal minority who would be against.
Right, but like
EA
I'm not saying
shareholders.
okay, so maybe remove Ultimate Team, not necessarily exactly what I intended, because the picture that I'm kind of painting here is to have something like it in there, but your time spent in game is what you use to earn those cards or earn
That would
those
be nice.
players. Right.
It'll never happen.
Kind of like how it was back in the day where you could spend as much time as you wanted because that's what you'd be spending in the game, not your money that you earned at your job working 9 to 5, but your time that you spent playing your game and earning those rewards.
Yeah, that's definitely exactly, Joe. That's something that I wanted to that I was hoping we would bring up in tonight's chat. Yeah, definitely in-game items should be affordable with the in-game currency that you earn, whether it's whether you're earning an in-game currency by playing the game or just earning things by simply playing the game by completing something like challenges, for
Yeah, and I mean,
example.
it doesn't necessarily even have to be like the game doesn't have to hand it to you. Like a perfect example that I can think of, and Mark, you're probably like, oh yeah, I wanted to bring that up. Omnislash in Final Fantasy VII. That's fucking hard to get, but once you do, like, you're that is where you get your sense of accomplishment. With
Oh yeah. When
unlocking
you're
the
going through all the wave after wave in the gold saucer
over and over again to afford it. It's 32,000 battle points, and battle points are extremely tough to come by, especially if you can't win a full wave of 10 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you're kicking ass, eventually you unlock that Omni Slash.
Yeah, I want to say
eventually
it took me
you're gonna
about
have the
like 4 or 5 hours to unlock it in my playthrough.
Yeah, you're gonna have the best limit break in the game for Cloud when that happens, and then you're gonna feel a lot more rewarded than if you had spent $2.99 on it. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
but if, say, old school Final Fantasy VII was put out now, Squaresoft would have made that a paid DLC. Squaresoft would have taken Cloud's Ultima weapon, made that a paid DLC. All of the different weapons except for, Ultima weapon is paid DLC. So no Ruby weapon, no Emerald weapon. It's just the story bosses, and that's it.
Stay tuned for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, where whenever you want to play a mini game at the Gold Saucer, you need to spend real money instead of Gil. It's to give you that authentic experience
You
of actually being at an arcade.
You can redeem your real world money for GP at the Gold Saucer, so you can just buy your way to Omnislash.
I could just imagine something like, if Pokemon Gold and Silver was made today, like, somebody saying, "Hey, you're having trouble with that fight against Whitney's milk tank. I'll tell you what, I'll trade you your Machop, but it's going to cost you $4.99 in real world dollars. It'll make the fight way easier. You won't have to struggle against it, but it's going to cost you money." And like,
It really,
yeah, or
No,
you
go ahead.
or you could just grind your levels and hope
you
for
could,
the best.
but see, here's the thing. Like, even kind of looping back to the sports game side of it, and a lot of these companies doing this, it almost feels like they would rather go through the effort of pissing people off, a segment of the fan base, by having all these microtransactions in there that some people will pay for, rather than actually putting the time in to make a good game that will sell consistently throughout its lifetime.
Right.
And you know what? The sad part probably is that the half put together game that has all the microtransactions that people spend a ton of money on is probably more profitable than actually making a good game.
Right,
yeah,
and
a lot of people focus on making a product instead of a game.
yeah,
Shame too, because you're basically commodifying an art form.
yeah, and so it kind of goes back to even a point that Mark brought up earlier. It's kind of like someone who has spent money, or I think you brought this up, Mark, where you spent money on the game, but you don't have time to play it because you're working, so you want to be able to spend that money to be able to stay competitive, right? Was that you who brought that up, Mark, or was that Russ, or was that Jim? I can't remember.
I think that may have been me. I may have mentioned that.
Okay, well,
Either which way, continue.
We're here now.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can I understand why people would argue for like that time saver microtransaction. I don't like it, but I understand it because people like the whole like with our talk earlier, Russ, when we were talking after work, like, people don't have time to sit and play competitively all hours of the day, so they want to have at least a fair opportunity, but it's not to the point where you spend X amount of dollars and you get the thing. You have a chance of getting the thing if you spend X amount of dollars, and that's the problem. That's the thing that I don't like. It's the chance. It's not guaranteed. And if there are games, because I know in playing, looping back to Walking Dead Road to Survival, they have made it so now you can, spend to have a chance to get a certain tune or a certain character or a certain card. But there's also a limited time event where you can spend a guaranteed amount of money and you're guaranteed to get that card. But it is miles a farther amount of money and it's mountains and mountains of money higher than doing a 30 pull or a 50 pull.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and people will pay it because they know that people are just torn between so many different things. They're vying for to get their eyeballs to be fixed in their direction. You know, we have
And
so many distractions right now than ever before in human history. So people, these publishers, they give people those options to spend the money, reduce that cooldown timer.
yeah, and
To
it's
get
that
to
sunk
get that
cost
leveled up right
fallacy,
away.
right? It's exactly what it is. It's a sunk cost fallacy. I spent so
Well,
much time in it, and I want to spend money so I can stay on top of my game.
it's not even that. It's the fact that if you don't spend the same amount of time in a game, um, in certain games, in comparison to people who have the time to spend in it, you'll fall behind and you'll feel like you cannot compete with them. Case in point, you look at, FPS games where, you have certain challenges you need to unlock certain weapons, and some of them are like not well above what
It's like
a
score
starting weapon can do.
150 headshots with this weapon
Oh no
to
no
unlock
no
an
no no!
attachment.
I don't mean that necessarily. I mean as in like the type of ones that you can actually buy with any kind of like DLC or any kind of like coins or currency in the game itself that you could easily get if you spend the money on it, versus doing the challenge to get the actual item in the game. Um, the issue there is why in the world do you have a leveling up system in an FPS game when the goal is supposed to be go out there and win the match with your team? Like I think back to like the original Battlefront 2 and like you maybe had 6 or 7 units available per side, 4 base units. That was it. There was no customizing your weapon. There was no this, that, or the other thing. You get out there and you shoot the other team, and
Yeah,
you win the
you
match. You
you
take
get
command posts,
those.
and you know what? It was fun. I played it a ton of time
Yeah, you
as a
get those
teenager.
prescribed soldier classes. Um, but then you take a look at 2019's Battlefront, and you have full customization, don't you?
Essentially, you have like what does it mark? Like 5 or 6 weapons per class, essentially, to
Uh,
pick from.
each class, it's more like, I think about 4 weapons per class, maybe 5 after DLC for some of them,
And
and
that's
then
not
you get,
terrible.
yeah. But I mean, again, I think one of the reasons why so many games have moved to leveling up and season passes and ways to keep you going and unlocking things bit by bit is because, like I was saying, there's so many things out there vying for your attention, and if you just gave everything to everybody right from the get-go, like original Battlefront 2, like you were saying, that
Hmm.
was great for people back then when we didn't have as many games to interact with, or as many things, as much media to consume. But
Yeah.
in today's world, it's sad, but if they would release something like that, people would be pumped for maybe a few months, and then they would stop playing, and then they would go do something else. So publishers need to find ways to keep people playing, and the longer people are playing, the more opportunities they will have to spend money.
Hmm.
You know what? That makes me so sad hearing you say that because as you said it, I was like, he's exactly right. I don't, unfortunately, with how legendary of a game the original Battlefront 2 is, you're right. After a few months, it would be on to the next FPS that came out.
Yeah.
And the only people would say would be the hardcore people playing the game, otherwise known as the people who still play the original one and like Game Ranger to this day, who you'd be lucky if you could land a shot on. Um, but at the same time, you're right, and it like hurts to hear that too because that game was a legendary one in my late childhood, mid to late teen years, and to basically be that candid about it, and you're pretty much exactly right about it too. It's just it kind of sucks to hear that, because I mean, shooter games are essentially a yearly release now. There's a Call of Duty game every year. Battlefield, obviously not quite so much. Battlefront, not so much either. But the thing is that like we don't need yearly releases in the Call of Duty franchise. But the one thing is that it keeps it current in people's attention. It lets them know, hey, there's a new Call of Duty game coming out. Oh, I wonder what they improved upon on this one. You know,
Yeah,
it's kind of disheartening.
yeah. You have your yearly CODs, you have your other big series like you mentioned, and then there are even a bunch of FPS games that come out and try to compete with the big guys, and they just don't get a whole lot of attention. They get pushed off to the side. There's so much competition and attention for people, these developers, these publishers, trying to compete for your attention and compete for your playtime. That yeah, you can't just that's the reality of it. You can't really just release something that's complete right then and there, and you have access to everything from the get go, or else people will get bored.
So what I understand you
It
saying
hurts
is
to hear, but you're right.
you're
Yeah,
basically just
I know what you're
refuting
saying.
my solution to the whole problem is, make a good game and it'll sell. It's not. So what you're basically saying is the whole idea, if you build it, they will come idea is obsolete at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's depressing coming up with this argument for sure. I know like you're kind of forced to agree with it, but I do think that it's mainly honed in on games that are meant to be multiplayer experiences and
So
meant to
like
keep people.
games as a service.
Yeah,
Right.
games as a service type of thing. Specifically, of course, like a lot of the first person shooters that come out have kind of it's almost mandatory for them to fall into this category and engage in these practices. But I would say that your more single player, solo campaign kind of story driven games aren't going to be as affected by this model. I don't think they're completely lost and without hope. I think it's mainly just the multiplayer experiences that they want you to keep coming back to, because there are still, there's still a consistent stream of single player games that are phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
So it's not all
absolutely.
doom and gloom.
I mean, actually, that the funny part is, and I know we got to get back to the video, but talking about the original Battlefront 2, you could play Galactic Conquest by yourself for hours on end and have a blast with it as a single player game, and it was replayable. That was a reason to replay it, and that's mostly what I did most of the time when it was out years ago. And you're right. On the single player side of it, that part is still very similar to the way it used to be. But on the multiplayer side, you're right. If you're not constantly keeping yourself in people's attention, they'll forget about you until they're like, "Oh, I should go back and play this game." You know?
Yeah,
And
like
then
yeah,
nobody's
think,
playing it.
yeah, yeah. It makes me think about like you and I, Russ. We were recently playing Battlefield 5 with our play
Yeah.
group, and what was I doing? I was playing as the medic class, and I was using one of the new guns that they added since the last time we were playing, and it was called the well gun. That's what I've been
Hmm.
using. And I just kind of instinctively start going to complete the challenges, the assignments. So by completing those assignments, you can unlock new skins for that gun. And I just kind of instinctively started doing that to give myself something to do for that while I'm playing that game. It gave me an extra goal. But I'm thinking to myself, if I didn't have that extra challenge to go for, it would probably uh, give me an incentive to switch games. I would feel like I already kind of have seen this one. I've unlocked everything that I wanted to unlock, and now at that point, it's a shame to say it almost, but like playing the game itself starts to get boring once you're past unlocking stuff like that. That's the game can kind of go downhill in that way for you.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Is that you're right. In a situation where you can have the same repeat experience, once every few hours, like especially if you're playing a multiplayer game like Battlefield 5 or Battlefield 1 or any of them like that, if you're playing on a particular game type within a 2-hour span, you've probably played on every single map by
Right.
that point. In which case, the experience is the same thing it always is. Go take a point, shoot people. That's it. Win the game. And the thing is that, like, yeah, it takes a different form every time, but the difference of an experience of how you accomplish a goal on a map you've already played on isn't different enough to sustain gameplay. And because you're not playing, in general, all together with just a group of people that you are hanging out with, you're just playing against nameless, faceless people over the internet. In which case, the only reason to play it is to play it.
Yeah,
And
I
you know
mean,
what? That lasts about an hour or two, and then that's it.
yeah. Sometimes that can happen. I mean, I don't want to say you don't need to play a game anymore once you've unlocked all the main things for it. I mean, obviously playing a game is an end within itself. You don't need any reason to play a game, but it's just something I'm kind of thinking out loud here about how, if I have all these challenges completed and I'm no longer getting that constant stream of rewards,
Yeah, it's
it
that
will make it
progression in the
less
game
appealing.
that kind of keeps
Yeah.
you coming back for more.
It's that grind, yeah.
Yeah. It's
It's
why
part of it for sure.
it's why people still play World of Warcraft, because there's always more progression, you know?
Yeah, imagine the next big first-person shooter coming out, and there's no leveling up or unlocking, outfit customization options, no skins, anything like that. It's just the game. I mean, like I said, if Battlefront 2 Original came out today, it would entertain people for a while. But then something else would come along that
Yeah, it would just
offers,
be a flash in a flash in the pan.
yeah, something else would come
So
along that offers a more robust hook to it, and then people would go to that.
So this actually probably brings you to the last point I wanted to make about this, even related to the sports game side of it, is that so what you're telling me essentially, and what kind of makes sense too, is that it's not necessarily how good the game is, it's how thoroughly it can continue to keep your attention, whether it's good or not, that determines whether you're going to continue to play a game.
Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to for sure.
That's a shame. I mean, that basically means, for a lot of us, we'll continue playing an average game that at least finds ways to keep your attention than playing a good game, because it's a good game.
Yeah, and you can definitely still play that game as an end in itself and play it for the fun. But I don't know if you guys are like me, but if you're playing a game, for example, like something like Battlefield 5 or any game where you can constantly unlock rewards like that, I don't know. I guess would you guys say that it would be slightly less rewarding to play those games if there's nothing left to unlock? There's no more endorphins set to be released.
Well, I mean, think of it this way: when you would play a game like, say, Mortal Kombat back in the day, and Mortal Kombat Deception, you didn't start with all the characters unlocked, but as you play through the campaign, you would unlock the characters, and you would get to try them out as you unlock them in like the arcade mode. But once you unlock all the characters and you've had your fun with it, there's kind of really no reason to continue playing, especially since the open world of that campaign, there's nothing left to do, and then you go to just hang out on the arcade mode. You fight 8 or 10 rounds, and then you finish, and after a while that it kind of loses its luster. It stops being fun, and so you move on to the next game, and
Yeah,
you
for
get your
sure.
sense of progression from a different game until that one stops feeling fun.
Yeah, it's probably an innate human desire to want that progression. And like a good example, you brought up Mortal Kombat. I know, I could bring up when the PlayStation Classic came out. My brother and I sat down. We were playing it, and they had Tekken 3 as
Mm-hmm.
one of the games on the PlayStation Classic. So, we were hanging out for a while, and I didn't really have much else to do. So we thought, okay, well, let's go through arcade mode with all these characters, and let's just try to unlock all the characters. And once we did that, we didn't really mess around with any of the other modes or fight each other too much. That was kind of the goal, and we hit it. And there wasn't too much of a reason to play anymore. I mean, diehard fighting game fans are, certainly going to continue playing it, but there's definitely something to be said for that loss of a hook when you meet that requirement.
Yeah, because you've met your goal and you're ready to move on. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, so yeah, it definitely ties back to microtransactions for sure, because it's these kinds of you know these kind of constructs are heavily embedded in that.
Yeah, and it innately gives you that sense of progression, and it gives you the next point to reach and achieve that goal. You go, okay, so I'm going to keep playing until I earn enough of my tokens to get another pull, or I'm going to keep playing till I unlock a new loot box so I can see what skins I get. Yeah.
Yeah, and then how long is it until
the next one.
somebody's driven to the point where they say, well, this has taken a while, I really want such and such item, I'm going to spend money on it so that I can get to where my goal is, because there are 5 other games that I want to play right now.
Yeah.
But would you guys want to return to the video?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let-
let's finish this out. We've strung this one out for quite a while.
That's okay.
let's go for it.
All right, let's say hello to Jim again. Hello,
This is
Jim.
our show, after all, not Jim's.
That is true.
Not forget, these licenses were perfectly affordable before loot boxes came along. It's only post-loot box that suddenly they're far too expensive. I mean, imagine a hypothetical world where Electronic Arts suddenly couldn't afford the rights to make a FIFA game. As if FIFA would allow a year go by without a FIFA game existing. Get fucking real. If for some reason one of these publishers couldn't afford to make a FIFA game, and let's be honest, they'd find the money somehow, likely the price for the licenses would go down. All this fucking Polygon article does is argue in favour of the perpetuation of a problem in order to perpetuate another problem, suggesting gambling mechanics should stay in video games so that sports associations can keep charging through the arsehole for their licenses. Fuck right off. This weak article completely hand waves away any real issues, any real concerns people have with gambling mechanics as coming from people who just hate EA or were just angry about Star Wars Battlefront 2. Piss off. I knew this video I was working on was coming when that article went out, and I had to bite my tongue at the time because I was saving it for now. Having had already spoken to gambling addicts, shopping addicts about this topic, to see concerns so sneeringly batted away in favour of complete corporate propaganda thoroughly disgusted me, and continues to disgust me. Games Press should be holding these companies to account, but they can't even comprehend why loot boxes and microtransactions overall are so fucking poisonous. Because they don't think about the prey. They don't think about the people these companies are preying on. They only see them as whales, dehumanized whales. And that misunderstanding has to stop. They're not rich kids with enough money to spare. They're not goddamn sea mammals. They're people with vulnerabilities that this game industry is exploiting, knowingly, gladly, greedily. And I am overhearing any defense for them because they are unbloody tenable. The regulation of loot boxes might not be pleasant, and it's not something I explicitly gunned for, but I did warn the game industry that it was coming, that if they kept pushing these microtransactions, if they kept pushing the limits to see exactly how much they could get away with, they would end up with a fight on their hands once politicians got interested. I said this time and time again, and no one bloody listened, and now look where we are, and it's on the industry's head. It's on their head, nobody else's. It's their problem. They do not deserve people taking up arms and defending them because they merrily walked into this situation. And ultimately, if you need gambling mechanics to keep your fucking games going, you shouldn't be in business. The world can do without your exploitative crap. Not that you really need them, you didn't need them before, you'd find a way to work around it if they were to go away. It's always about greed, it's not about need. And if you trip over yourself to apologize for what these corporations do, you are little more to them than a useful idiot.
To have any chance of turning players into payers, game developers need to get their in-app purchases right.
Offers and scarcity plays into the loss aversion. If there are rare cards up here and you see the goblin going with his clocks tick-tock, I'll take it away from you, I'll take it away from you. They are scarce, they go away. This is a brilliant way to get more.
Monetize, retain, acquire. This is the mantra of the modern video game industry. It's been the creed of the shit-sucking mobile sector for years and years, and in recent times, from the tail end of the last generation to now, it's increasingly become the creed of the so-called AAA game publisher. Monetize, retain, acquire. Form those habits, trick those customers, turn those players into payers, as one disgusting organization once suggested. Much of what they are doing is unethical, much of it is certainly immoral, so much so that little talk givers need to check their morals at the door to even discuss the tactics at play. And the industry gets away with it because such addiction is so often misunderstood. Another testimonial I received, one of many more than discussed in this video, described how they got hooked on a MOBA that used social pressure to keep people spending, and how nobody would help them when they sought support to stop. Uni's response, it's not gambling, it's not an addiction, they said. They offered me zero support because the counsellors simply couldn't get their heads around that I was addicted to wasting money just for friends on a video game. There was nothing. No support, just another round of adults who drowned my voice out, and I was berated for not having a real problem and just being a spoilt child. Peer pressure is just another way the industry makes money off the back of vulnerable people. Recently, news broke that kids are being bullied for only having default skins in Fortnite. While the game is free, children are pressured to keep up with their friends to maintain a social status by not being the poor scrub with the bargain basement cosmetics. Youngsters are reportedly begging their parents for Fortnite money because nobody will play with them otherwise, and the word default itself has become a derogatory term in schools. And if you think that's just kids being kids, that the game industry cannot possibly be held to account for this, well, guess what else Mr. Jernstrom said?
We are herd animals, we tend to do what...
You guys are both so default.
Yep,
all
I
the
am
others
proudly
do.
default.
You all sit quiet listening to me because that's what all of the other guys do here. So, especially when people are similar to us, this means that you should have the socially accepted way of behaving in your game should be paying. You want to tell people, for instance, when a clan member of theirs spend IAP money, you want the whole clan to know, because then that becomes the socially acceptable way of behaving. You absolutely do not want to tell them that the majority of people in your game never spend money. That's poison. Never tell them that.
Am I demonstrating this fucking clearly enough now? Am I effectively showcasing that this industry has nasty parasitic bastards in it that know exactly what they're doing and not only don't care, but are proud of themselves? And it's not just Jernstrom. You'll find men like him absolutely everywhere if you know which stones to turn over. David Zendel is a researcher and lecturer who has devoted much of his time to the study of loot boxes. In a paper published in June of 2019, he noted that while he cannot claim loot boxes create problem gamblers, there's evidence to suggest problem gamblers are certainly exploited by them. According to his findings, when loot boxes were removed from Heroes of the Storm, problem gamblers, and only problem gamblers, spent less money on the game. The spending habits of other players didn't change. The spending habits of the gamblers did because the gambling was gone. There are many studies showing a correlation between gambling addiction and loot boxes, but correlation is not causation, I will say that. However, the near-identical psychological similarities between loot boxes and gambling, coupled with reports like those from Zendel, support the idea that those with addiction struggles are routinely preyed upon by an industry that, regardless of whether they create compulsive gamblers, sure as shit profit from them. And as Electronic Arts' illegal VP sits before a parliamentary committee trying to rebrand loot boxes as surprise mechanics and claiming they're ethical because people enjoy them, I need to stress just how dirty the game industry's money is. And it's not just dirty, it's filthy fucking money. The billions upon billions being funneled into the offshore tax havens of these video game companies stink of abuse. Shameless, profiteering abuse. If it's not outright evil, it is amoral in the extreme, and they flaunt their immorality in public with the smug, satisfied self-confidence of monsters who've gotten away with it. Just go back and watch, again, the sneering manner in which EA's Kerry Hopkins patronizes her way through an explanation of what loot boxes are. Just go and read the articles from dozens of industry mouthpieces who disregard criticisms of microtransactions because if people didn't want them, they wouldn't spend money on them. That argument, in the face of the compulsive strings microtransactions pull, is as weak as it is despicably dishonest. There was a comment on Reddit once that said, Jim Sterling is not pro-consumer, he's anti-AAA. And I'll take that. That sounds fine by me. I do hate what the mainstream industry has done to the medium. How the unchecked, unimpeded greed that fuels corporate decision-making has turned games into grindy, unsatisfying money vacuums, all in the name of psychological ambush. I say this not with affected internet outrage, but with a genuine, understated, ice-cold fury. I genuinely hate most video game publishers, their executives, and every seedy, slimy, corrupt thing they've done to both the industry at large and, more importantly, their many victims. You damn right, I'm anti-triple A. Hopefully this video has gone some way toward explaining the level of anger I have when it comes to talking about mainstream AAA video games. It should explain why, whenever I say AAA, I struggle not to do it in a sneering, condescending, mocking voice, because, I mean, I've always found that the designation AAA is arrogant on the part of the game industry. It's a sign of arrogance, just showcasing that they think they're so far above everything else, when nothing they do actually qualifies them for a designation of 3 A's. A is supposed to be good in grading, and the AAA video game industry is not AAA, it is triple shit. That showed them they're triple shit. Anyway, I hope that this video indicates to you that I don't do this for, as some people call it, outrage clicks. I do this because I fucking care, because I give a shit, because I truly believe in my heart that this is an important topic, that I do hold the values that I express when I talk about microtransactions and loot boxes and whatnot. You know, I hold those values true to myself. I really do believe that when I talk about this, I am right. I wouldn't say it if I didn't think I was right, if I didn't know I was right. I truly am not optimistic about where the so-called AAA video game industry is going. Comprehensive, complete feeling productions are becoming rarer and rarer. Shallow, threadbare, unfinished games that are designed deliberately poorly so that you can pay extra to improve the experience. They're becoming the norm. The idea of the service video game is a lie, because it isn't a service. Well, it's not a service they provide to you, it's a service you provide to them. You are giving them, you are inviting them direct access to your wallet. They sit back and collect money off you simply for existing. And they spout lies and propaganda that are then perpetuated by their defenders, by certain journalists, by spokespeople in the industry. And it's a racket, and it's shameless, and it's disgusting. Thank you so much to the people who did share their stories. Thank you so much to people who showed me some of these open boasts from the video game industry itself. Thank you to AceXWing88, to H Bomber Guy for reading the testimonials we had. Thank you for watching, and of course, thank God for me.
All right then.
All right. Yep. And that's Jim Sterling.
So he hit upon something at the end. He was talking about, in addition to them, putting out the games in the state they are, but essentially enablers in like games journalism that essentially praise the games regardless of those kind of mechanics going on, because there's no incentive for them to go against the companies, because guess where half the funding comes from?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, IGN at one point in time was actually a worthwhile place to go to for games reviews. Now it's just basically, a place you go to if you want to see the opinion of people who are getting paid by the company whose game they're reviewing in the first place.
Yeah, well, so maybe before we paint this conversation in a more positive light, do you want to take it to the darker place and talk about the game you've been wanting to talk about, Rob?
Oh, you bet you I do.
All right, let's fire it up.
Okay. So, obviously, the whole thing with loot boxes have been building over the past, well, maybe not the past few years itself. It kind of cooled down a little bit, but upwards, moving up until about 2017, I would say, from about the 4 or 3 years prior to that, the loot box thing had been getting more and more egregious, and companies were getting bolder and bolder with their methods they went by with the loot boxes. But it kind of all culminated around Star Wars Battlefront 2, EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2, not the good one. So,
And we
the
have to
kicker
make
here
that
was
indication, everybody. There is a good Battlefront 2, and then there's a not
don't
so
get
good
me
Battlefront 2.
don't get me wrong.
yeah,
It
definitely
is
is.
much better now than it was when it first started. But the issue is that, the game itself was so blatant in essentially tying your ability to level up your characters or their abilities to these loot boxes that you had to either grind constantly in game to get or pay money for them, that it essentially almost became a pay to win type of system. There was
Oh,
so
yeah.
much flack that came back at EA because of this. They paused the microtransactions for several months from
They
the
had to
game's
change up
release
the whole
point.
system.
They did. They had to change up the whole system. It basically the little bit of pride that I have about it, being a Star Wars game, came down to the fact that it finally took a Star Wars game to get legislators' attention about the loot boxes in the game. And part of that was because, oh well, it's Star Wars. It's the thing that's been around for a while, and it's much easier to say, well, they're doing that to Call of Duty. Well, it's Call of Duty. They did it to Star Wars. They did that to Star Wars. Um, and see, that's the thing, is that it took that to get that attention, but you realize how blatant it was. It wasn't like, if you play as a heavy trooper or a assault trooper, that the more you play as them with those particular abilities, you can, earn points to level them up. That wasn't the way the game originally was. It was, you earn credits for each match, and then you had to go buy a loot box. And I think they had them available for each of the classes, but it's tough to remember at this point.
I
And
think you bought like a general. You would buy kind of generalized loot boxes.
yeah,
And depending
there
on
was
what
one
was in
for
them, you might get something for the class that you play as, maybe not. Stuff
right,
like that.
and it wasn't even necessarily guaranteed that you got something good for the class that you got. You weren't. It wasn't even guaranteed you were going to get something that was better than a common, or like the step above that for that particular class. So basically the incentive there was, well, if you want to get better at the game quickly, just buy some of the EA's currency for the game and buy a bunch of loot boxes, and you'll be guaranteed to get the stuff that'll make your character powerful. And these were appreciable upgrades to your character's um rate of cooldown for their weapons,
Yeah,
damage they could absorb, health regeneration.
yeah. Because
um,
earlier, you know, y- you kind of went almost easy on him by saying that it was close to pay to win, but it in fact it was in the direction of pay to win for sure. It was pay to win because, like you're saying now, yeah, the types of things you would get in these packs of star cards, they would directly affect your performance in the game, like you're saying, with cooldowns and stuff like that. So it was for sure
yeah,
step over the boundaries, and microtransactions should never affect your performance in a game.
absolutely. The only reason I didn't say it was completely blatant pay to win is because you couldn't just outright buy the particular star card you wanted at the level. That I probably should have defined that a
No,
bit
yeah,
clearer
but
earlier.
Well,
But
but
you're
I mean,
exactly right. You're exactly right.
yeah, for sure. Like for example, the thermal detonator, the
Yeah.
grenade in the game, reducing the cooldown from when you throw it and the
hmm
time it takes to be able to throw another one out there. That's effectively increasing your DPS when
Yeah,
you think
exactly.
about it. So yeah, you're paying to get stronger in the game.
yeah, I don't
Exactly. And the thing
understand
is that
how that wouldn't be pay to win, though.
no, I'm not saying it wasn't. I was saying that it wasn't like the highest level, what I would consider the most absolutely egregious, which is you could just outright purchase it. Um, but it was like a very small step below that level. It is still absolutely being pay to win. Um,
Yeah,
Again,
no,
it was
for
probably
sure, I
probably a
agree.
bad definition on my part, but at the same time, what I'm getting at is that there
No,
was no alternative. There wasn't like, oh, you could play like this offline mode to get you know credits for it, anything that would there you may have been able to get a few credits for some of like the offline like just AI match modes, but it was nothing reasonable enough to be able to afford the stuff. And it basically became this game that had a reputation for being a pay-to-win Star Wars AAA shooter with that had the nerve to call itself Battlefront after the legacy that the original Battlefront games had after the first Battlefront in the new generation came out and was like three-quarters of a skeleton linked together with Gorilla Glue.
Oh yeah, the first Battlefront from EA, that was, yeah. I know you. I think you mentioned before about how lately there's just been a trend over the years of game that's not completely finished and then putting in updates over time to get to that complete game. Yeah, EA's first Battlefront was a perfect example of that.
Bare bones, absolute bare bones.
Absolutely.
And they had the nerve to charge $60 for it, but they made sure they got it out before The Force Awakens came out.
Yep, they were banking
That
off
was the
that
most
hype.
important part of it. Got to make sure we get that, Star Wars nostalgia money. And it was just, with Battlefront 2 doing that, especially since it was, even the same way with the original ones. The first Battlefront was good, but the second Battlefront was the one that built that legacy. For it to have it be in a situation where it was just so absolutely blatantly a cash grab for pay to win was just, it was unconscionable, and it caused such an outrage that people finally spoke up and said something. And when you finally had people like writing to their representatives in the House of Representatives, like at the federal level, to say, hey, you got to do something about this, this is absolutely predatory, it finally stopped. And
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna, to add to that. Yeah, like Battlefront 2, that seemed to be the real turning point. It would seem to be the straw that broke the camel's back, because
Yep.
right around that time is when, like you said, you did see a lot of legislation and more discussions happening on the news and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we just watched the Jimquisitions video, but another good video would be, I believe, the Act Man did a video
Oh,
about
absolutely.
the rise and fall of microtransactions, and
Mm-hmm.
he spends a good amount of time talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2 and how it, uh, I'm not sure if he phrased it this way, but it kind of like died for the sins of the gaming industry. That was the one where it really got dragged through the mud so badly that you don't see that kind of degree of microtransactions in games anymore.
Yeah, and you know what? You're exactly right. And that's a perfect way to put it, too, because now they revamped the game so much that you earn skill points through playing the game. You can level up your star cards with those skill points for each class, and you level up. The game now feels like exactly what it should have felt like when it first came out.
Yeah.
And you know what? It cost the game a large amount of its install base of people wanting to play it because they just couldn't help themselves to try and reach a little bit further into the players' wallets. And you know what? They paid for it long term. They couldn't have just kept it to something cosmetic. They had to make it pay to win, and they basically absolutely obliterated what could have been a good Star Wars game because they wanted to get more money out of the player.
Yeah, and remember when the game first came out with unlocking the heroes, because you can play as the heroes too. And
Oh my God! It was like what, level 80 for like Darth Vader? No, it was credits. It was like 80,000 credits.
I think it was, like, to put it in perspective, all the other characters were, I think, 10,000 credits, but Luke and Vader were both 30,000 credits.
Yeah.
And then people gave EA shit about it, and their response was basically to say that, oh, well, by
We
earning
want you to have a goal.
credits, you get they said it gives players a sense of pride and accomplishment.
Yeah, pride and accomplishment to grind for hours and days and weeks on end to get the most iconic Star Wars characters.
Yeah.
That's absolutely god-awful frustrating, but yet they had no problem putting Iden Versio as the character that they wanted to make sure everybody had available right from the start.
I think she was cheaper than all the other characters.
I mean, like, I get it. It was the main character of the campaign mode for Battlefront 2. I have no problem with the character or any of that kind of stuff, but, like, it was just so blatantly done to the point where, like, oh, you want to play as Luke or Vader? Oh, I'm sorry, you got to fork over that cash.
Battlefront 2 in its entirety is just a perfect example of shit. I remember the trailers leading up to that. They got us so pumped up. We were watching that thinking, wow, the first Battlefront was such a letdown. It was so bare bones. All this stuff that they're showing, they're going to fix everything. It's going to be great. They're going to put a campaign in, but even the campaign was a jumped up tutorial. That's all it was. It was garbage. Everything that they did with that game was mishandled.
And the thing is that, like, I've never seen a situation where where these companies have such a fantastic disconnect between what their players expect out of them and what they're willing to give them, and then do the whole surprise Pikachu face meme when it backlashes on them. Because it's absolutely ridiculous to say, like, well, we wanted players to have a sense of accomplishment to spend 30,000 credits on Luke or Vader, and look at them like, are you outside of your mind right now? I mean, it's absolutely unthinkable to do something like that, and it's just it ruined a what could have been a very good Star Wars game by doing that. And you know what? You know how badly they screwed up? They screwed up so badly that when Star Wars Squadrons was announced, they made sure to announce there were no microtransactions for that game. That's how badly they screwed up the reputation of that series for it.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad. Well, they never made an old school Battlefront 3. They still have a chance. Who knows if they're gonna take it? It's definitely gonna. They definitely have a lot of ground to cover if they're gonna make a Battlefront 3 that's gonna make fans happy. But
This
I
is
don't know.
true.
Do you
Sorry, I had
guys?
to get that one off my chest.
Yeah, for sure. I knew it was coming. It's definitely a good topic. It's something that I wanted to talk about too. But that's kind of the darkest case before dawn. So do you guys want to start talking about the potential good of microtransactions? I know, Joe, you have a video queued up right now. Right?
Yes, so here's the thing. I wanted this to be a little bit more balanced, and I'm kind of happy with the discussion that we've had so far, with it being a little bit of, critical, so to speak, on, monetization practices in video games. And so I said, you know what, let me go ahead and check to see if I can find any videos that, are overall positive about monetization practices in video games. And I found only one. And I don't know if that was because I didn't look hard enough or if there really isn't that many. Because when I typed in monetization in video games, positive, I still got like the Jim Sterling videos. I still got the Actman videos that are heavily critical.
I mean, Joe, I hate to tell you this, but looking into YouTube for a video as to why microtransactions are good is probably like trying to make a video on why you paying higher prices for gasoline is good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was never like a hot
It's gonna be tough
topic.
to find that kind of video. It's in the face of the algorithm.
I mean,
Right.
I will say I have seen some videos from the channel Extra Credits, specifically where they're talking about game design, where they've talked about good practices in microtransactions and how to create like fair pricing systems and be upfront with your players. And I think that is basically what you can hope for most of the time is you offer fair pricing. You don't try to pull any psychological tricks on your players, and basically, not try to pressure them into it so they can think with a clear head. But I want to see what this video says because I'm curious to see like what the reasons for it are.
Yeah.
But I see see the initial splash here with the thank you to the Patreon. So let's see what they got going on.
Yeah.
Here.
So we're gonna go from big YouTuber, both in size and in subscriber base, to small YouTuber with a couple hundred subscribers. This video only had a few hundred views, so we might be the only channel or the only podcast covering this video.
Ever cover it.
Yes, so this is by a channel named Super Dan, and the video title, mostly all caps, is Microtransactions Are Good for Video Games, and let me explain why. So let's go ahead and, as they say, let's just jump right into it. Oop, I forgot to unmute the tab. There we go.
So have you ever gone over to the PlayStation Store, the Xbox Store, made a purchase over on Steam, or gone up to the beloved Walmart to piss away $60 on a game, bring it home, and hate the game, but then you go to return it, and you can't get your money back for a game that was released with a bunch of bugs and is not fun to play?
Oh, by the way, I haven't pre-screened this video, so I have no idea what he talks about outside of the first maybe like 30 seconds of this video, so...
Oh, well, that was generally smart, Joe. Let's see how it pans out for you.
Yeah, I mean, just being up front here.
Keep on your guard.
Here we go.
All right, keep Super Dan with a grain of salt, everyone.
Yes.
Great example of a free to play game with financial incentives done very, very well. It focuses a lot on team aspects. In essence, you can play the game completely without spending a single dime. Every single aspect of Warframe is available, and it is 100% free unless you make the decision to buy one of those microtransactions. You could save some time by making purchases. This could in turn further benefit your team. The game is constantly praised for its lack of randomness in its in-game store and fracture. The player knows exactly what they are getting when they are making purchases. You're not going for some random drop, such as Destiny 2 with the beloved Test Eververse, where you go and buy a microtransaction and it is random. Fortnite.
So, but like, here's my problem with his argument. Like, he's naming one game that he feels does a good job, but that's not the norm of the environment with which we find ourselves.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. You're right. It's not really the environment in which we find ourselves, but I think the side of it he's taking really is that it prevents people from blowing $60 on a game that they come to find out that they won't like. And to some extent, I can understand that, but that's completely presupposing that you hadn't seen any information about the game you bought, didn't know anything about it, and just randomly picked up a game and essentially said, this looks good based off the cover, and bought the game.
Yeah, but like the thing is, like, normally when I go to buy a game, I have at least, read the reviews before I click purchase on Steam, right? So I'm not just walking into a GameStop and picking up a random game off the shelf and going, nope, this is good. I don't care what it is. I want this. No, nobody does that. Building straw men over here.
Yeah, he's also he seems to be taking a stance against Gymquisition, and this guy is saying, even if microtransactions are in there, you have the option to just simply ignore them, whereas Gymquisition was talking about how some people it's not that easy for them, as we were talking about earlier. So we could keep watching and see how the argument develops.
Yeah.
Fortnite is another example of a game that does microtransactions correctly. These games are free. You can download them, try them. If you like it, you can keep it. If you don't like it, you can remove it from your console. You can remove it from your PC. It seems like microtransactions are the talk of the town. Star Wars Battlefront 2's review bomb definitely showed that microtransactions were done horribly incorrectly inside of that game. That game cost you $60 though. Microtransactions can be a good thing.
But like that's why a lot of people who had purchased that game review bombed that game.
Because they charged you full price and then had the nerve to have the microtransactions on top of it.
I'm getting the sense that he's making this argument in defense of strictly in defense of free-to-play games.
Yeah, I think that is pretty much the only time I've ever seen an actual defense of microtransactions is for free-to-play games.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, yeah, if it's a free-to-play game, you kind of have to expect that, or else they're giving the game away for free. They have to monetize.
Yeah,
it's not UNICEF making these games.
Absolutely. But again, I fall back onto my response. This is not the environment we're finding ourselves in. They're releasing full-priced games, incomplete, and saying, here's a game, have fun. If you want to do good, spend some money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, why don't we give the video, give it
another few minutes and see what they say.
If he keeps addressing it from the perspective of free-to-play games, I mean, I don't think there's too much to comment on there. I mean, obviously, your free-to-play games are going to have microtransactions of some kind.
Absolutely. All right, let's keep watching.
I like microtransactions. I like playing free games, and I like to try games that I can just remove from my console, that I can just remove from my PC. It's all up to the developers whether they do them in a good way or whether they do them in a bad way. Hearthstone is similar to Warframe. You're not required to spend money in order to properly compete with other players. If you'd like to play the game less, you'd benefit from spending money, but the game gives you daily quests which allow you to earn gold the old-fashioned way. The in-game purchases do not take the fun away from those who do not want to spend any money on the game. Unlike Warframe, Hearthstone uses its randomness to its advantage. It's a building game. And much like buying Pokemon cards, you never know what you're going to get. It diverts as much as possible from the dreaded pay-to-win moneymaker. A game is supplemented by advertisements or small purchases. This business model is most common in mobile games. If you own an Android device, if you own some sort of a smartphone, if you are one of those people that pissed away $600 on an Apple phone, then good for you. Those also have microtransactions. Games need to make money, especially now in 2018, in order for those developers to make back their investment of both time and resources needed to create a good, enjoyable experience.
Should we give this one the axe?
Yeah, I think he's pretty much kind of just reiterating the same things we had talked about before. But you know what? As much as this may be basically kind of getting us to the same exact thing we've talked about this particular video, this is pretty much about the only good argument I've seen for microtransactions in a game, and it comes from the free-to-play thing because the argument is always you don't have to pay for anything. And you know what? He's perfectly right. I have not spent a dime on Smite the entire time I played it, and I still have fun playing it. But if that's the best argument for microtransactions, then it's it's not reflecting terribly well on it. So I think that's kind of what this guy's getting at, and I don't really think that's a good thing as much as I think it's just not a good or bad thing. It's just straight down the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely accentuates the profitability of microtransactions, though, because just so many free-to-play games out there. You know, these developers who can make, in some cases, very large games that take a lot of time to make, and give them away for free. It says something about the profitability of microtransactions because they're able to earn so much profit and make a living off just microtransactions.
Absolutely. And for it to be able to develop your next free-to-play game with that money and then basically make money on top of that with more microtransactions. So it's yeah, if this is the best argument that's being offered up for it, I don't think it's doing it a service.
Yeah,
But it was a worthy try there, Joe.
Do you have anything to add on this, Joe?
Not really. I mean, as far
like I
as
said, if I can find it, there was a video from Extra Credits that Joe, if I can find, I'll have you link it to that because that actually does talk about basically the same principle what's here, but albeit in a much more succinct manner.
Would you like to watch that instead?
No, I don't think it's terribly necessary because the arguments are roughly the same. They're just presented in a better light.
Well,
but you're right. Sorry, Mark, I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was just going to try and transition a little bit because, I thought that, it might be kind of a little bit boring if we just spent the whole video dunking on microtransactions. I mean, there's so many people out there who hate these things, and it's a common thing to talk about in that sort of frame of mind. So,
of course,
let's talk about, like, do you guys have any good examples of how it's been done? I want to talk about maybe some ways that publishers could monetize their game in a healthier way. Like for me, I'll start things off by saying one interesting thing that I saw for microtransactions, at least. I thought it was an interesting idea what they did with Halo 5 with the Warzone firefight mode. You remember this, Russ? I don't know.
I do, and believe it or not, I honestly wound up finding myself not liking the fact that the way Warzone worked was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a very long time since I played it. After each of the matches, you got packs of basically weapons you could use for the game, whether they be vehicles or heavier weapons or any of that kind of stuff. You would earn them by playing.
They were pretty much itemized. Like, for example, if you wanted to bring a Scorpion tank,
you needed a card for it.
Into a battle, you would need the card, and then you would spend that card to bring it in. And when it was destroyed, that card was spent. You would have to either get more or just use something else. But I thought that mode was interesting because basically what they did was that they took pretty much everything in the Halo universe and they put it into tiers. And as you went through the course of the game and progressed, you would unlock higher and higher tiers of things to
Mhm.
bring into the battle. So of course you couldn't start the game with a scorpion tank. You know, maybe you could use one of your cards and bring like a special variant of a carbine
Right.
into the game early on, and then later on you could bring in the scorpion to keep things balanced. But I thought that that was an interesting way to do microtransactions, because it kind of created this separate experience where the microtransactions could kind of have free reign without affecting the core Halo experience that you're used to playing. It was just like this chaotic mode with all these crazy things happening. Bring, you know, whatever you had unlocked or on hand into the
Mhm.
mode. You know, maybe they could have made it better without those those cards being involved in the whole monetization element, sure.
Mhm.
But as far as a game that uses that kind of thing, you know, it was pretty much just cosmetics that would affect the core Halo experience. But the Warzone firefight, even though it ended up being pretty unbalanced and ultimately unsatisfying, I thought that that was an interesting way to do microtransactions. They kind of just created a whole new game type, a whole like a tiny world to let them run free without ruining the experience of the main game.
No, you've got a good point. I mean, you actually do make a good point about the way Warzone was put together, and I thought it was kind of interesting that that's how they were going to run it because it was such a huge departure from the previous 6 games essentially.
Mhm.
Um, and it was interesting at the time because I remembered myself basically feeling like whenever I had something that was a finite resource, like any of the cards or anything like that, I found myself being extremely conservative about wanting to spend them because, you know, it would be just my luck. I'd call in a scorpion and some, you know, rando Calrissian would show up out of nowhere and blow up the tank with a
Yeah.
rocket launcher, and that would be the end of the scorpion that I just called in.
Yeah, well, one cool thing about it too was when you would open these packs of cards full of items to use in the Warzone firefight mode. Sometimes you would also get these things. I think they were called licenses, and if you got the license for something, it meant that whenever you would open a pack of cards, you had a higher chance of getting that. So, for example, the one thing I remember getting a license of was actually a scorpion tank. So I had a near
Oh, okay.
limitless number of these things. So that was really helpful to have. But you know, different people will have greater access to different resources for that mode. So
And that can
I
create
thought it
some
was kind of
interesting
interesting.
team dynamics. You're right, because like say you had a license for like scorpions, you could be the person who's typically calling in scorpions if you've got a near
Mhm.
limitless number. Let's say maybe the ones I got were for like the fuel rod gun or the fuel rod cannon, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so maybe, you know, that means I spend most of my time calling in heavy weapons to use to take out tanks the other side has, which now could very well be a finite resource that the other team can only call on a little bit. The only issue I do see there is that it winds up creating I don't know how to put it. It winds up creating a tragedy of the commons type situation when you're the person that has access to the weapons you need. And if you're not playing with a team of people that you're in a party with, you might be more reluctant to use that when you see that everybody else around you is basically either not using them at all, or you're in a losing situation where it's not going to help you anyway. So I think from what you said, it was an interesting attempt at it because it's the first time I saw a game try and actually make a microtransaction an active but yet not immediately pay off um, addition to a game type. But
Yeah.
you're right, it wound up being extremely chaotic.
Yeah. It wasn't thought out perfectly well, but I thought that that was an interesting way of putting microtransactions in a game. But what about you two? Have you come across anything like that? Any positive experiences with microtransactions?
It's tough to say.
I
Because
mean,
I've really never spent much in the way of money on microtransactions, not in the traditional way you would consider. Most of the money I've spent on is typically from like expansion packs to games. I mean,
Yeah,
I've
I'm
seen
hearing from you, and I'm hearing from us crickets chirping. So not very. We're not off to a great start with this
yeah, I mean,
this positivity.
it's tough to say because you know, essentially what you're asking is that was there a good way a game managed to wring extra money out of the play? I shouldn't say wring. That gives off a bias there. Was there a good way a game encourage players to spend extra money on it to enhance the gameplay experience. And it's tough to say because just the overall idea of you'll want to spend extra money for this game to enjoy the experience more when I've already had to spend money on the game to begin with kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I tend to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, personally, I would prefer if, all games would give you access to unlockables just by playing the game with no randomness or microtransactions. That's the ideal case.
Yeah,
Mhm.
kind of like how old school Call of Duty used to be. You play the
Yeah,
game, you grind,
exactly.
you unlock the guns, and you have fun
Yeah,
doing it.
yeah, and back then, if you saw someone with a cool skin, you knew, like, oh wow, this guy really spent a lot of time using the M4 carbine. He got a lot of kills with that. So yeah, they have a really nice looking skin on that guy.
Yeah,
It
and
must be good
now
what
and
they
now
did.
these days you see a guy with the exact same cool skin, you go, "Wow, that guy must have spent a lot of money on that skin."
Yeah, exactly. It diminishes it for sure.
Mhm.
Well, you
I
know
know.
what? There are some good examples I could think of at least. Just kind of seen recently. It's been interesting seeing the fact that oh, what's the battle royale thing for Call of Duty?
Warzone.
Warzone.
Thank you. Did they call it literally the same thing as Guardians did?
In Halo, it was Warzone Firefight,
Okay. That's why I was like, it had to have been a different name.
but
Just
yeah,
seeing recently, like they're having like 80s action stars as like a microtransaction thing we can get the skin for it. Like I saw one for like John Rambo, and I'm like,
yeah, they're putting
I
John
thought that's.
McClane in there too, huh?
I mean, that's kind of cool. Like there was a game that I had played for a while that was like a spiritual successor to Roller Coaster Tycoon called Planet Coaster. That kind of did that with different franchises. Like there was like a Back to the Future like skin type of deal for coasters and stuff. There was one for Ghostbusters and at the same time, like that was kind of cool. I could see that being a thing, and I think the kind of microtransactions that I'm personally okay with usually come down to cosmetic, where you can kind of do something like that to fit your fit the way you'd like to play the game. Like if they told me, hey, starting tomorrow for Battlefield 5, we're gonna wind up having a microtransaction where you can dress yourself like a rebel pilot from Star Wars. I'd be like, sign me up. Give me the Wedge Antilles helmet right now.
Oh, God. As
Never
you get
mind the fact that you're
headshotted.
exactly because you're standing out there in an orange jumpsuit with a white helmet.
Yeah, you'd be out there on Battlefield 5 as Wedge Antilles, and he'd get annihilated with a missile launcher, and you'd be like, "Wait a minute, Wedge Antilles doesn't die. This isn't canon."
The all half a second he was in Rise of the Skywalker was the only good part of the movie.
there weren't many.
I don't even want to go down that road, but I mean, like in
Yeah, another
situations like
podcast.
that, exactly. Yeah, welcome to 2 hours of Russ rewrites the sequel trilogy.
I'm just gonna stay on mute for
There's
that
a
one time, let you know.
Russ, there's a video by a channel called Cardinal West. He does a rewrite of not only the sequel trilogy but the prequel trilogy, and both of them are pretty good.
Well,
Personally, I like the
I'll see about that.
prequels, but
I
that's
kind of do too.
that's a different story. That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones is kind of not aged well, but I find myself liking even the Phantom Menace better than Attack of the Clones these days.
Yeah, I
And,
mean, I would have to say that Attack of the Clones certainly does not reach
It hasn't
as
aged well.
well, and it doesn't reach as low as it used to, as far as being the worst Star Wars film in
That's because by comparison we have worse ones. Anyway, before I get too far into that,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
a rabbit hole I'm gonna
I'll
follow
forward
down.
those videos along to you in the Discord chat.
Yes. But no, like I was saying, I think that's a good case for a microtransaction because you don't need to do that. You don't need to bother buying the skins for something. But if there's something cool from like a franchise that you like, or something that's got kind of like a cool look to it, I'm like, you know what? The hell with it. Yeah, this is kind of cool. I think this might be something that I could have some fun with. Or
But you know what, though? That kind of goes back to Jim's point about people who have struggles with that fear of missing out, that fear that, okay, I'm going to do this next pull and I'm going to get it. Or I'm going to spend the money that I can't afford to spend that I need to save on my rent or my food.
Well, see, now, here's the thing, and this is this is where the two sides of it, kind of differ. And Mark, I think this is a little bit what you were getting at as well before, where when you were saying you don't really consider it gambling. In certain circumstances with certain loot boxes, I do consider gambling, or very close to straight up gambling. But I think there are situations where yes, you do have players who have addiction issues with this kind of stuff, which should be absolutely taken seriously. I think it's something where there's absolutely warnings on the game. There are microtransactions with this. If you have, if in the past you've had addiction issues similar to gambling addiction, you know, I don't know if it necessarily consult somebody, but it's something where it basically would say like, proceed with caution. I think that's perfectly reasonable, but I don't always think it's fair to completely remove it from a game if completely fair to remove it altogether from a game if it's something cosmetic, because you do have, unfortunately, some players who have to have everything for their collection. There are some people that do like collecting stuff, and there's some people that cannot help themselves. As long as you make sure that it is perfectly clear to them that, hey, just so you know what's coming down the pike, this is what's in this game. If you don't want to, put yourself through that, turn back now. I think that's reasonable.
This is the future of TV commercials. You're gonna see a commercial about Star Wars Battlefront, and at the end, it's gonna have an orange screen that says "Truth" on it.
Oh God.
Have you or a loved one been affected by game monetization? Then you may have a civil suit.
But I mean, here's the thing, like, those type of addiction issues, like, gambling addiction, yeah, I mean, it's a thing that's been around for a long time, for as long as people have been gambling money on things. And I think the reason why, some people are so reluctant to say, yeah, that person has an issue with gambling addiction is because it doesn't look like the standard things we think of addiction like, addicted to alcohol, addicted to drugs, addicted to, food, addicted to God knows what. But it is an issue all the same. The problem is that you cannot always take away something fairly innocuous from everybody because a small minority cannot help themselves. But you want to make sure that it's perfectly clear to those people that, hey, this is something that's in this game. If you have an issue with this, proceed with caution or turn back now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. It's kind of like the similar idea with the whole gun
The
control.
Surgeon General's warning.
Right, and like the gun control debate, like people will argue, well, I, am responsible with my firearms. Why should I lose my right to bear my arms if there's some people that can't, do what they're supposed to, or they make choices to put people in danger.
The thing is, this is the same principle as, how do you solve a particular problem? Do you take away the thing that causes the problem for the person, or do you take away the object that the problem is using? Which one makes more sense? And to me, the idea would be, well, you try to fix the problem that causes somebody to be in that position in the first place, because that's what's going to help them long term. It's not that it's that particular thing and only that particular thing. Sometimes they say that some people have addictive personalities with certain type of situations like that, and if it's not one thing that might be addicted to, it might be another. That's why people who are addicted to smoking, once they quit smoking, next thing you know, they're addicted to eating, and eating more than normal. So
right.
The true issue there is addiction itself, not the fact that they want to eat a lot.
Right, it's wanting to get that rush of endorphins.
Exactly.
It isn't the act itself, it's the feedback that you get from it.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm no psychologist, but there's definitely, there are things that, substances that are meant to addict you, but then there's also the tendency in certain people to fall into certain habits and become addicted to things that aren't necessarily classified as addictive, by the majority of people.
Yeah. And I think there is a lot of progress being made in the general public understanding the mental aspect that goes with it of these different addictions and having an issue with addiction in general, and that is a big plus. um, the only unfortunate part is that a large number of people tend to kind of hand wave addiction away when it's not like the traditional avenues we think of. But even in this situation, this is something a person can get very much addicted to, that like they need help finding a way to curb that addiction. You can't always take away something that they're addicted to. However, when it comes time for things like loot boxes, if you're basically, making people feel like they're gambling, and some people are addicted to that, and you're, either not posting the odds or you're making it a pay to win situation, you're fueling the problem. It's gone past like a person who can't necessarily help themselves. You're actively enabling them to not be able to help themselves. That's where it becomes problematic.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add there, Joe?
I mean, as far as like game monetization goes, aside from my own personal experiences with like the mobile games and the spending money, I have a real problem with the, and we've talked about it already, games being released incomplete, or games being released with the intent to make you purchase things that you would like to do, rather than give you the ability to unlock it just by simply playing the game. Like, things that come to mind, and Russell and I have spoken about this before, but
you mean like Pokemon Sword and Shield?
well, well, no, I'm making reference to Rome 2 with the culture
Oh, well,
packs,
that as well.
and Crusader Kings 2 with culture packs. Like, you couldn't, in Crusader Kings 2, you could only play as a Christian faction with the base game. If you wanted to play as a Muslim, or if you wanted to play as a pagan, you would need those religion packs. You would need those culture packs.
Those Benjamins.
Yeah, and it got to the point where if you want the full experience of the game, you need to drop over $100 to $200. I mean, take a look at
ridiculous.
Take a look at a game like,
man, they're expensive.
Yeah, and I mean, take a look at a game like The Sims 4, where you can get the base game for I want to say like $30 or $40, and you'll enjoy yourself, but you're missing 90% of the game. Like, there's a content pack for The Sims 4 for everything. There's a content pack to add pets. There's a content pack to add the toddler age to the game.
Yeah, and they're more than happy to only make it like, oh, it's only like $2.99 for the content pack. That's no big deal. 10 content packs later, and you've basically spent double the amount that you already spent on the game to begin with.
Yeah, if you go and tally up all of the content packs for that game plus the price of entry, you're spending over $300 or $400. Even more, maybe. It feels like they release a content pack every couple months for that game. And therein kind of lies the issue. These developers are trying to turn these games into games as a service, or use the mobile games or the free-to-play games model in their $60 games. And that's where I really take issue. My personal experiences aside, with the mobile games and microtransactions aside, if I'm buying a game and I'm spending my hard-earned money on a game and I'm spending $60 to $80 on it, I want the whole fucking game. Don't play me with like this. There's games where I go, okay, yeah, I'll shill out the extra $20 for a campaign expansion, or I'll pay a little bit more to extend my experience. But when you're developing a full game and then partitioning it off as if you've already gone in with a plan to monetize it and say, we can make more out of this game, that's where I really take offense with it.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good time to start talking about the last thing that I wanted to talk. We've been talking a lot about the negative impact, and we're trying to find some positive. We're pretty much discovering that it's pretty difficult to find some positives about microtransactions, and we're not going to really know if these microtransactions are necessary for developers to stay in business and keep making these blockbuster modern games that blow people away unless we went through and reviewed all the finances of these companies and what they're really earning.
Right.
So, I'm not prepared to have that kind of financial discussion. But the last thing that I really wanted to talk about personally is what are some other good ways that publishers can monetize their games to make an extra buck so that they don't have to put microtransactions in their games. So I could, yeah.
Go ahead, Mark. You start.
Okay, yeah, sure. I just wanted to start off by saying a couple ideas that I had, and yeah, I was thinking collector's editions are a good way for publishers to make more money off of their games instead of having that regular $60 game. Maybe charge $70 or $80, and players get some extra stuff, but publishers are still making more money than if they had just sold it as a $60 game.
Agreed. Yeah.
Do you guys like collector's editions?
I've only bought them a few times, but I have no issues with collector's editions because oftentimes it's not a whole lot extra added to it. But if somebody likes the novelty of like, hey, I want to get the game that's like it's got some memorabilia that goes with it, adding an extra $10 or $15 onto the game's price, if it helps the developer out, I've got no qualms about it.
Yeah, I like collecting, so it's but that kind of stuff is nice for me to see.
I
What were you
mean,
gonna say, Joe?
I like it in theory, but in practice, there's such leeway with the level of quality of collector's items that you'd be getting. I mean, the first one that kind of comes to my mind was the Fallout 76 collector's edition, where they promised, a nylon duffel bag and a Brotherhood of Steel helmet, and that wasn't what you got. You got some cheap plastic bag out of it, and if it was what it was, advertised, that would be one thing. But I don't know, it's just I'm hesitant to say, yeah, let's go ahead and say this is our solution, because I feel like it also kind of depends on the game too, because if you were to say put out a collector's edition of Fortnite and charge people $60 for it, people would look at you like you're fucking insane, because you're going, all right, well, I could spend $60 for Fortnite and get a piece of plastic that they spent, like, who knows how much money they spent on it. They're going to be making so much profit off of that regardless. But then they're still leaving the game in there with the microtransactions that you're going to clearly spend your money at.
True.
Well, I'll give you a good example. Sorry to cut you off, Mark.
Before we get away from Joe's current example with Fortnite, I haven't played it, but personally, like for someone like me who is a collector and appreciates physical versions of games, Fortnite, as far as I know, has never been released physically. So if I was a fan of that game, I would definitely actually be interested in spending maybe up to $60, around that amount of money, for a physical copy of it, depending on what that would get me in addition to the base game. Would it give me a huge selection of skins, for example, right off the bat to go with that physical purchase? Would it give me those extra things that you would expect from either a collector's edition or for a game that's free to play? If they're going to charge you $60, of course, for a physical version, yeah, you would want something substantial to come with it. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's just from my perspective as a collector, but that would sound like something that's up my alley.
Yeah,
personally.
and I mean, there's always
see that working out well.
Like, there's always going to be those people that are willing to spend that money. I just don't think, say, putting out collector's edition is going to be the catch-all solution for this problem that we find ourselves in with video game monetization, because not everyone is a collector like you, Mark. You know what I mean? Like, not everyone's going to be willing to spend that money, that extra money, for that physical item that they're getting along with it. Some people are just buying the games for the games. And you know what?
Yeah, it could drum up some extra profits, though.
Right.
I mean, like, I think of, like, an example, like, if you had this or not, Mark. Do you remember how like Halo 2 had a collector's edition that had like the metal case for the
Oh
game and
yeah, they had a
came with like the
steelbook
DVD
case.
about like the disc that showed like them working on the game and the whole like kind of production of it.
That's
And
sadly missing from my collection. I still want that to this
I
day.
I,
Every
I
time I
have
find
that. Yeah.
every time I find a copy of it, it's just start rusted to shit. They
Well,
haven't survived well.
yeah, and mine's a little bit pitted at this point, but you can still read Halo 2 on the outside edge of it. But like something like that is a really cool thing too, because like for a game with the kind of legacy that it had, especially even after the first one, before Halo 2 kind of achieved legendary status, having the concept of like, okay, it's got like a steel case to it, and then it's also got like the DVD that has stuff about the production of the game on it. That's kind of cool as a collector's edition that costs really no more than just whatever the time they took to record it while they were, making the game and printing another disc and the steel case. Like something like that, that is a good thing. You can't do that for every game because obviously not every game's going to have the same kind of legacy that attracts people to it. But I think it's definitely a viable type of situation. And they do that a lot for other games that still come out now. It was done quite often for sports games. It was done for a few Star Wars games as well. So, I mean, it's totally viable. I mean, on occasion, depending on what the game is, I don't think I would drop $120 to get like, some sort of plastic statuette that came with the game, unless it was, Star Wars Squadrons 2 that came with Wedge Antilles' helmet in real size. But, that's
He
pretty
just
much
wants
about
to
it.
live
But
that dream of being a.
I'm telling you right now, that helmet comes out pretty soon, actually, and I'm going to seriously consider buying that helmet.
The one I sent you the link to?
Yep, you betcha.
I can just see you right now,
Yeah,
just
well-
like sitting there playing your flight sim games in your bedroom wearing that helmet, Russ. I honestly can.
You probably.
Yeah, and he's gonna turn the games and make sounds with his pew pew pew. But okay, well, collector's editions, that was just kind of like the appetizer
Mhm.
idea for me because it's something that's publishers have been doing for a long time, and I think it's a good way to drum up extra money. Not
Okay.
like you said, Joe. Not everyone's going to be willing to pay
Yeah,
that extra amount.
yeah,
of money,
it'll
but
bring
for those
in.
people,
It'll bring in some money, but it's not going to be enough to kind of like replace what they make with microtransactions.
for sure, which is why my more substantial solution touches on something Russ brought up earlier, which was increasing the base price of games, which is already, starting to happen a little bit. Like I know, for example, some PS5 games are $70 from the get-go when they're new. So definitely, obviously, that's going to lead to more profits if they're just raising the base price of the game. It really, it's tough to say when they make like they break what's the break even point when you compare raising the base price of the game compared to microtransactions, when you can eliminate microtransactions from a game and how expensive the base game has to be in order for you to do that.
Well, see, that's the issue. Like, if you said like, if you had a whole bunch of people, go to a company and said like, what do you need to raise the price to of this game so you stop putting microtransactions into it? I almost get the feeling they would say it needs to be $70, and then a year later, transactions are back in the game. Because I get the feeling that it's really like it's a bell you can't unring at this point. They're here to stay for better or for worse. But you're right, Mark. That would be a thing that, in a perfect world, not even a perfect world. I would say in general, if a company said like, "Hey, we're stopping with the microtransactions, we're bumping the price of the games up to $70 a piece to offset it. No more microtransactions. That's it." If they did that, I'd be like, you know what? That's worth the extra $10 to not have to deal with the nonsense of it. Sure, why not?
So
yeah, I don't even think it's that of an idea though to think that it's just a a nice idea for microtransactions to go away. I mean, I think it kind of lines up a little bit because there's been so much backlash from players towards companies over microtransactions, so much so that there are going to be a lot of people out there who will shy away from a game if it has microtransactions. So seeing them go away wouldn't seem too far-fetched because in the end it's all about money. So if it's if a publisher can work out that they charge extra for the base game and eliminate microtransactions, and they don't have to worry about fans dropping their game a couple months later because of predatory practices, that might start to be the trend once enough players have turned on these companies.
God, I hope so. That would be nice.
Well, here's something that I would throw out there that might be a little controversial. I mean, you're saying $70.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty reasonable. Maybe for like a single player game, like your like a standard sized experience. But I would say for something like a multiplayer game, something that's meant to string you along and keep you playing. I'm talking about the games that we've been talking about all night, the ones that have microtransactions that want to keep you hooked, keep you playing so that you spend money. It's mostly these multiplayer games that are out there. I would say, it might be controversial, but I would spend more than $70. I would actually spend, I would say a max of $100. Like, let's say if they sold something like Halo Infinite later this year, hopefully later this year, for
Yeah, I hope so.
yeah, if they sold that for $100, and it came with the promise that was going to buy me at least 2 or 3 years of the developers committing to the game and continuously generating more of it, more not just weapons here and there or an extra skin or something, but
New
lots
maps,
more.
new experiences.
Yeah, lots of new maps, new ways to play the game, new modes, in addition to all the minor upgrades. Then, yeah, I'd be game for that because I mean, think about how much Halo we've played over the years.
Yeah,
Like Master Chief Collection alone, we've spent years playing that on and off. But
we definitely got the money's worth out of it.
yeah, we've for $60. That's definitely we definitely got enough gameplay.
So, Mark,
yeah.
then here's my question to you. What would the difference be spending $100 for an experience that's maintained and, it's meant to provide you with more content, more playability, increasing the increasing the longevity of the game, and then purchasing a season pass?
Did you say season pass?
Yeah.
Well, this would be on the basis that microtransactions would not be in the game at all.
Right, but
in the game, no battle pass, no microtransactions at all. Yeah.
No, I think I think I get what you're getting at, and I think Joe's basically saying like, what's the difference between like, paying $100 for Halo Infinite and having the promise from the developers at Livestream 343 that we're gonna make the longevity of this game be 3 years, at least 3 years worth of content, that there's no microtransactions, you don't have to pay for it, everybody gets the same experience, versus like buying Call of Duty Modern Warfare a few years ago and buying the season pass for $40. And to some extent, I understand what you're saying, Joe, but at the same time, I think the big part of it is that by people actually buying the game and the developer making a promise to it, that to me feels like the true essence of like a live service where it's like, hey, we intend to make this game last this many years. We're charging a higher price, but we're also committing to continually develop assets for this game.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. And
Okay.
in that kind of market for games, it becomes less about the game as it is when it launches, and instead of games being judged so heavily on that scale, it becomes more about how much you can trust the developer and their promises, which is a leap you'll have to take. And hypothetically, if someone did charge $100 for a multiplayer game and it was supposed to go on for a few years, they might not live up to the expectation. But in that case, it would kind of be the same as today if someone releases a broken game. Either way, the reputation is getting hurt,
True. Like, think of it this way, Joe. What if EA came out and said, all right, we're going to stop making yearly Madden releases. What we're going to do is we're going to offer Madden as a live service, and the initial buy-in to the price of the game is $120, but it lasts for 4 years, and you get free roster updates every year and free patches to the game. How would you feel?
I don't know. I mean, here's my thing. Like, I'll spend as much money as it costs to buy a game, so long as it's a good game. That's it. That's all I really look for when I look for my games these days, because I don't want to waste my time on a game that I'm not going to enjoy. You know.
Fair enough.
So I completely get what you're getting at, Mark. Like, I definitely think if they were to permanently increase the entry fee to a game to $70 or $80, I'd be a little leery at first, but that would kind of force me to be even more selective than I already am about the games that I choose to invest my time in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I see where you guys are coming from. Paying $100 up front is pretty similar to paying $60 right away, and then $40 for battle passes. But personally, with something like a battle pass, it doesn't offer the kind of content that I'm interested in. The really meaningful, meaty stuff that keeps you playing the game.
Yeah, it
Usually,
just tends to feel like extra stuff tacked on.
yeah, the battle pass, it seems to just kind of string you along to keep you playing, and it gives you a new ladder to work through so that you stay interested in the game, and you usually tend to get minor things from those. And also with battle passes, I don't know how often they're going to come out. When am I going to draw the line? If they're going to sell a battle pass for $15 and it's going to last and for one season, and that season is 6 months, when do I draw that line? When do I stop buying them? Does that determine how long I play the game? Whereas in my example, if I paid a flat $100 fee, then I know that's what I'm paying. The developers are going to make this promise to improve it and stick with it over time. I don't have to deal with any bullshit, and I know that I can enjoy the game and not see any of those dollar signs in my game, like I mentioned earlier towards the beginning of this podcast. I can kind of just sit back and relax and enjoy my game.
So,
after that.
what if I present you with an alternate solution to that? So, same idea. Developer is promising to upkeep the servers for a multiplayer game. They're promising to develop it as time goes on and try and make it the best experience possible for X amount of years, right? But rather than charging you $60 or $100 up front, they charge you a monthly subscription fee, kind of like
the MMO model,
right? So kind of like a World of Warcraft or a RuneScape, right? You can get the game for however much it would cost up front, and then go ahead or even release it for free, like they do with these free-to-play games, and then say you can choose to play the base game for free, or if you'd like to subscribe to get the full experience, you can unlock it for X amount of days or X amount of months. And if you choose to continue subscribing, if you enjoy the game, cool. If not, it was nice having you play.
Yeah, personally, I'm not a fan of this model. That's the main thing keeping me away from a game like. Yeah, it's just tougher to get me in on something like that, and it goes back into the idea of I don't know how long to play the game, and if I'm subscribed to something, I might feel like I have to, like I'm sort of like I have an obligation to play it if I'm paying a monthly fee for it. Like if I had a WoW subscription, I'd feel pretty crappy if I went a whole month without playing WoW. I would feel obligated to play it. But the nice thing about paying that increased charge up front is you're kind of buying a worry-free experience. In my mind, that's the way it would work, just the way that I'm envisioning it now, because I wouldn't have to worry about next month's payment or what the next battle pass is going to offer or any sort of microtransaction that's brought into the fold.
It's one and done.
Yeah, I would pay one flat fee, and then I can leave it up to the developer good on their promise.
So
I'd rather take the,
No, I'm sorry, Mark. Finish your thought.
No, I said I'd just rather take that leap and pay that extra base amount of money than fall into any other sort of pricing scheme.
Okay. All right.
Fair
So
enough.
Just me personally. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and that's fine. But I don't know. I am a little bit more partial to the idea of subscriptions because you can cancel at any time and you can always resubscribe at any time, you know. So say you do buy a game and say, let's just say for argument's sake that the cost of a yearly subscription would be the same as paying the upfront cost of $100. So if there goes a couple of months where you go, all right, well, I don't really feel like playing anymore, or you go, oh yeah, I didn't play the last month. I haven't played in a couple of months. Let me cancel my subscription. You know,
Yeah, but see, here's the issue with that kind of stuff. Like, oftentimes when you wind up paying a subscription for a game, and you're like, oh, well, I'm not playing this very much, but it's a whole lot of aggravation to have to go through canceling that and then starting it back up again. When I do, a lot of people will just wind up letting it go and continuing to pay for it, and then coming back to it whenever.
It's
Kind of like
the
paying for a streaming
blockbuster,
service.
like the blockbuster mentality. It's like, oh, you're gonna go rent something at the video store back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You might watch it that same night, but you don't feel like taking it back to that store, and then they're making all that money on late fees off you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, see, that's the thing is that, like, it's fine and well and good to say the subscription model might be a good way to go about it because, if you decide you stop wanting to play it, that's fine. But oftentimes, if you're talking about a game as a live service, the goal of the company is to keep you playing the game. And I kind of see it as a situation where one is having a developer trying to encourage you to continue to play the game by constantly trying to keep you hooked to it. Whereas on the other side of it, you're basically saying, look, I'm paying you up front. I'm entrusting that you'll actually keep your word and, continue to put things out for this game. Make this game itself make me want to play. Don't encourage me to play because I feel bad that I'm continuing to spend money on this.
All right, yeah.
I think there's a change in mentality, a change in tone of sorts. One is is this game worth my money to continue paying for it? And the other one is the developer living up to what I paid them for?
Yeah, but I do see where you're coming from, Joe, and it could turn out to be the same amount of money if you would go with something like a subscription model.
Mm-hmm.
I just would prefer paying for something up front and then I don't have to worry about it again. I mentioned
It's worry free.
Halo Master Chief Collection earlier. That's a game that our play group continues to go back to. We always cycle back to Master Chief Collection. So if that, for example, if that had a subscription model, that would make the decision kind of just more hectic for me. Like, is it, we want to get back to this game, but a week
Is it
before we
worth it?
jump back to this other game, right? So that factor comes into play there. Whereas, back when MCC came out, I paid a flat fee for it. It's mine. I can go back and play it whenever I want to. I don't have to worry about any sort of subscription.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I mean, well, if it were up to me, we would be doing away with these microtransactions, but clearly they're here to stay, unfortunately speaking.
I think that's the main takeaway, is that they're not going to be going away anytime soon, as much as we can kind of brainstorm on ways to draw them down. At this rate, the only thing that's really kind of keeping them at bay is the bad press that comes with being really greedy about them, a la Battlefront 2.
Right.
Yeah, it's just gonna encourage more. It's just gonna encourage companies to become smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And like, have you ever heard of planned obsolescence with
Yep.
everyday
Apple
goods?
got in big trouble with planned obsolescence back in the day.
Yeah,
Because of the iPhone. Yeah.
it's going to be the same kind of philosophy that's going to go into game development. Companies are just going to have to figure out how many microtransactions players are willing to tolerate before they, until they feel like they got their money's worth.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, look, I guess we can kind of go rounds and round with that too, because you're exactly right with the concept of planned obsolescence. They're basically trying to figure out, like, okay, when's the point? Is it no longer worthwhile for us to continue putting effort into this game? And should we put a new one out that'll encourage people to buy the new one, like they do every year with sports games or Call of Duty games? You know?
Yeah.
You guys have any closing comments on the topic?
I mean, as far as microtransactions and video game monetization goes, as we've said multiple times already, they're unfortunately here to stay. So then it's the responsibility falls on us to be more wary about them, I guess. I'm trying to think of something kind of profound to say to leave us off with, but we need to put it out there. And I think that this podcast was a good thing to kind of put that out there and continue the conversation to help people be more aware and be more mindful about the games they play, the money they spend. It'll force parents especially to keep a closer watch on their children as they play games, because they could be spending money, real money that they'll never be able to see again, because it'll just force us, like I said, to be more aware. And
No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's helpful to bring attention to it. Um, just because when you have people armed with more knowledge, it usually tends to be a better situation in general for everybody involved. So the more you have people aware that, like, hey, there are some people who have addiction issues with this type of thing, the game should make sure that it's clearly known that, hey, there's microtransactions in here. If you have an issue with any kind of addiction similar to gambling addiction, you might want to steer clear. Or on the side for parents, like, make sure that they know there's microtransactions in this game. You better check and make sure that your kids aren't, like, spending money on your credit card without you knowing, or racking up a huge bill. I think in general, just furthering the conversation, but trying to go with the goal of educating people about it more in every facet of what is affected by it is a good thing and a worthwhile goal.
Yeah, we addressed the topic from a wide variety of perspectives. Definitely had a good conversation about it, and yeah, the microtransactions might be here to stay, but we have to kind of just accept, I guess, that as the gaming industry grows, we're kind of swimming in shark-infested waters, and the sharks are after us and our wallets, and you just gotta make sure that you don't end up as one of the seals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think that puts it pretty succinctly. Little graphic, but sure, why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
Alright. Well, gentlemen, I think this has been a rather fruitful discussion, don't you?
Yeah,
Sure.
it seems we've reached the end of the topic, so I just wanted to first start by thanking both you, Marcamune, and AceXWing88 for joining me today on this discussion. And I'd also like to thank you at home for sticking through the last 3.5 hours with us. If you'd like to check out either of the videos that we covered today, links in description, links to Mark and Russ's shared channel, not Mark and Russ share channel. Russ shares a channel with someone else. Links are in description. Check them out. They're pretty awesome. Yeah. So, any final thoughts before we go ahead and close it out for tonight, guys?
That does it for me. Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Same for me as well. So, bye.
Still working on that outro.
Yeah, we'll get there. Well, we still need to figure out an outro. That's our outro.